Chapter 1630 Depths of the Thunderclouds. Chapter 1630 Depths of the Thunderclouds. Ling Han charged towards the thunderclouds. Boom! 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 There had been 50 lightning giants in the first place, and the heavenly tribulation only maintained that kind of intensity and did not become any stronger than that. However, as Ling Han approached, it seemed as if the heaven and earth had been angered. Boom! Another bolt of lightning blasted out, forming a new lightning giant. It was not just one, either. Boom! 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 The number of lightning giants became more and more. Some were brandishing spears of lightning, some were wielding swords of lightning, and some were directly using their fists, shooting out blazing bolts of lightning. Ling Han was unafraid. The terrifying power of lightning was circulating in the Black Tower, so he, too, seemed to have fused with the lightning element regulations and had become assimilated with it. Each bolt of lightning shot at him, yet did not manage to harm him in the slightest. The present Ling Han was equivalent to the embodiment of the regulations of lightning, yet also seemed superior to it. That was because the regulations inside the Black Tower were clearly superior to the regulations of the immortal realm. How is this possible? All the Saint Kings cried out in shock. Even if Ling Han could be so powerful to be able to destroy all those lightning giants, they would not have been so stunned. But this scene was really too shocking. This was a heavenly tribulation. Whom would it give face to? Yet Ling Han had just so directly charged into the innermost depths of the heavenly tribulation, challenging the authority of heaven and earth. Boom, boom, boom. The heavenly tribulation became increasingly violent. This was the might of the heaven and earth, and would not allow anyone to challenge its authority. The number of lightning giants continued to increase, and had reached as many as 300. By this time, even the Saint Kings were terrified. Even if it was them who were facing over 300 great saints, they would be frowning, and only those peak stage Saint Kings could really be unafraid. But if it was them, the might of the heavenly tribulation would be even stronger, and become countless peak stage Saint Kings ganging up on them. Ling Han forged on bravely. Perhaps he would only have this one chance. This was the first time the Black Tower had opened the 6th level, and a large volume of lightning element regulations had surged in, which allowed him to temporarily ignore the heavenly tribulation. But in future, this would definitely not happen a second time. He charged into the thunderclouds. It was complete darkness. If it was not due to the fact that there were still blazing bolts of lightning flashing within, he would practically suspect that he had once again entered into some kind of dangerous place, and all his senses were sealed. Ling Han advanced continuously forwards, and the strength of the lightning giants was also frighteningly increasing. No longer were mere numbers used to suppress him, but superiority in cultivation level was also brought into play. A Saint King level lightning giant had appeared. If he did not have the help of the Black Tower, no matter how freakish Ling Han was, he would not be able to match this kind of opponent, but at present he could directly ignore it, no matter how madly it blasted at him. So what? He just simply advanced ahead, completely at ease. In the outside world, not one person could see what was happening in the thunderclouds. They only knew that since the thunderclouds had not dissipated, it meant that Ling Han was not dead. Ling Han quickened his steps. Half a day's time had already passed a very long time ago. He had to hurry. The place ahead of him suddenly cleared up. Ling Han was so stunned that he stopped his advance. There was actually a sacrificial altar in the innermost depths of the thunderclouds. Could it be that the heavenly tribulation was a man-made entity? He went closer, yet shook his head continuously. This sacrificial altar did not seem to have been built by human hands, but was rather formed naturally. Mysteriously, there was a force that had molded it into this form. Perhaps all the sacrificial altars in the world were also molded into their forms under the influence of this. The sacrificial altar was very simple and was only 3 meters tall. The material it was made of was indistinguishable, and in its center there was a recess. There was a liquid splashing visibly in it, exuding a refreshing fragrance that could not be described. "That is the heavenly tribulation fluid," Small Tower explained. "You're rich, brat. The Black Tower has opened the 6th level, which allowed you to temporarily develop resonance with the great Tao of lightning, and thus you were able to barge into this place. Otherwise, you would only be capable of obtaining the heavenly tribulation fluid of this realm when you became a Saint King." Ling Han nodded. The ancient realm had the restrictions of the ancient realm. The strongest power in this realm was Saint King. Thus, when he became a Saint King with his strength, he would naturally be able to sweep aside all other Saint Kings, and would similarly be able to barge into the depths of the thunderclouds. However, this was only limited to the ancient realm. If he broke through to Saint King tier in the celestial realm, that was a different story. What benefits does the heavenly tribulation fluid have? Ling Han asked. It can help you comprehend the great Tao of lightning, Small Tower answered. Doesn't the Black Tower contain lightning element regulations? Ling Han asked curiously. That is different. That had been brought in through the heavenly venerable tier, gathering the regulations of the celestial realm, and even I am only able to use it. If you want to attain comprehension through it, it would be no different from directly touching the regulations of lightning of the celestial realm, and would not provide any increase to its effects, Small Tower explained. Perhaps, now with another level of the Black Tower opening, its mood had also become considerably better. It actually did not act Sundara, even after so much time had passed. Realization dawned on Ling Han, and he walked quickly towards the sacrificial altar. Xiao, xiao, xiao! Multiple lightning giants appeared, and the last had even reached the peak stage of Saint King tier, wanting to kill Ling Han. Hello, heavenly tribulation. Goodbye, heavenly tribulation. Ling Han joked, passing through them. Like no technique could touch him, the attacks of the lightning giants did not have the slightest effect on him. He arrived at the side of the sacrificial altar and hurriedly took out the heavenly tribulation fluid within the recess, putting it away into the Black Tower. This was too valuable. He would only get 2 such chances in this lifetime. He would get another chance upon becoming a Saint King in the ancient realm. HI's defenses were too strong. In future, when he became a celestial king of the 9 heavens, he similarly could be invincible and obtain the heavenly tribulation fluid another time. But by that time, would he still need the heavenly tribulation fluid? There was not much heavenly tribulation fluid, only about 1 liter. It was gleaming blue like the waters of an ocean, exuding an unusual fragrance that was refreshing to the heart and spirit. There were patterns of great Tao rolling about visibly within, as if it contained all the heavens eternally. Ling Han did not look too long at it. He could slowly study it in future. He stared at the sacrificial altar. There were similarly countless patterns of great Tao on it. They had to be linked to the formation of the heavenly tribulation. If he could comprehend them, then wouldn't he be able to grasp the power of divine punishment? He studied them very closely, but not too long later, this sacrificial altar mysteriously vanished. The thunderclouds around him had also disappeared without a trace. Ling Han realized that he had reappeared in the galaxy. Half a day's time had passed, and the heavenly tribulation had dissipated. Too bad. Ling Han couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. If he was given enough time, he would be able to copy down the patterns of great Tao on the sacrificial altar. Even if he couldn't understand them for the moment, it was fine. He would be able to slowly study them in future. Ling Han, what did you discover in the thunderclouds? All the Saint Kings gathered around him. They were all very curious. Some of them were excited to the point that they couldn't even speak coherently. Entering into the depths of the thunderclouds was something that had never been successfully done before. It was naturally impossible for Ling Han to tell the truth. They were only allies. He could not possibly allow these people to know the secret of the heavenly tribulation fluid. Only even more heavenly tribulation, he said. Though the Saint Kings did not believe him, they could do nothing. Ling Han had already said thus, and if they pressed the question, they would have to take the risk of becoming hostile with Ling Han. Who knew if he still had trump cards in his hands? Even if he didn't, as long as they could not definitely kill him, wouldn't it be an easy task for a small saint to flee? Furthermore, once this kind of freak had advanced into medium saint and great saint, he would be able to easily kill Saint Kings, even with his own strength. Thus, without the confidence that they would be able to kill him with a single strike, who would want to start a war with Ling Han? Chapter 1631, Ambush. Chapter 1631, Ambush. In the distance, the open clouds king left on the golden path with a flutter of his sleeve. He naturally would not be letting the matter go just like this, but this was not a good time to make a move. Then, what was the point of him continuing to stay here? Becoming a joke. Ling Han's left hand held the Empress's hand, while his right hand arm was wrapped around the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. He took a step forwards, and the golden path unfurled. He had already returned to Woodfigure Planet. Congratulations, friend Ling. All the Saint Kings expressed their congratulations with clasped hands. As for how many of them were truly sincere, that was something that only they themselves knew. Though Ling Han was only a small saint, judging from the heavenly tribulation that he had undergone, it was clear that he possessed the battle prowess of a great saint. His battle prowess had even reached the middle stage or late stage of the great saint tier. He was overwhelmingly strong. Once this guy became a medium saint, wouldn't he be a qualified match for a Saint King? Added with the fact that Ling Han had already killed Saint Kings before, the Saint Kings would naturally not dare to underestimate him in the slightest. They treated him completely like he was their equal. Ling Han thanked all the saints and smilingly said, "I have prepared some fine dishes and excellent wine. Please come and have a taste, everyone." Though a large part of the godly medicines in the Black Tower had been destroyed, those that remained had been baptized by the purple lightning, and their effects were multiplied 100-fold. Using them as cooking ingredients was naturally excellent. Ling Han also added some reincarnation tree leaves that had not been turned into ashes. This could completely be considered a saintly medicine if one was talking in simple terms of comprehension. The saints were naturally pleased. Even they could only think of having such a lavish feast. They definitely could not bear to put out such luxurious dishes. Yet Ling Han did not feel the slightest pity. When the reincarnation tree sprouted and grew leaves again, its effects would definitely be improved greatly. As for these, they would only be disposed of if he didn't use them. After the celebratory feast, it was time for the treasure exchange. However, the last treasure exchange had been more than a dozen years ago, so how could they produce so many treasures in such a short period of time? The saints' hearts were naturally not focused on this event. Ling Han had already become a Saint King, and the time of entry into the celestial realm was getting closer and closer. They had to confirm that he really would bring them and their clans into the celestial realm, and those with ambitions were thinking of when would be a proper time to make their move. Otherwise, when Ling Han had become a medium saint or great saint, even Saint Kings would not be able to suppress him. Even if the Tao seminar had concluded, these saints did not leave, providing various reasons for their extended stay. The ambience was a little strange. Even an idiot could feel the strangeness in the atmosphere. Perhaps there was presently a violent storm brewing. Yet Ling Han did not care, and simply focused on stabilizing his cultivation level. Unfortunately, the reincarnation tree was temporarily unusable, and he could only slowly accumulate his comprehension of cultivation level with time. This caused his comprehension of cultivation level to improve very slowly, and it was unable to catch up to his origin power level that was already at the level of a small saint even after much time had passed. There was nothing that could be done. He had already reached this level. If he could advance one step forward in 10,000 years, that would be considered quite fast. He could not ask for too much. Thankfully, Small Tower had already said that the reincarnation tree would definitely recover in 2 years at most, and the effects would be greatly improved this time round. It would be a piece of cake for one day to be equivalent to 100 years. And because of this, Ling Han did not use the heavenly tribulation fluid. It was best to be able to comprehend Tao underneath the reincarnation tree after consuming it. Otherwise, it would be a major waste. He did not have to rush in these 2 years. On would Figure Planet. A storm was brewing in the dark. There were already a few Saint Kings that were restless. With every passing day, Ling Han would become a little bit stronger, and once his power reached a critical point, even Saint Kings would not be able to do anything to him. All the Saint Kings were sure that Ling Han had definitely obtained the inheritance of a celestial king. Otherwise, it was definitely impossible for him to be so strong. Under the influence of such greed, a few Saint Kings were presently brewing a storm. The situation is not too good. On this day, Ling Han had gathered the Empress, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, the Rain Emperor, Su Ran, Ding Ping, and the others together. All the Saint Kings already have their suspicions, and I have lost the trump card to kill Saint Kings. Dark waves are rippling in secret, and the storm could explode at any moment. The Rain Emperor nodded. He had already formed over 9 million stars, and was close to the bottleneck point. He gruffly said, "We had best hide for a while. There's no need to get momentary satisfaction now." He was an absolute supporter of war. His assertiveness was no less than the Empress, but he was definitely not a foolishly brave person. With their present strength, they were indeed far from being a match for the Saint Kings. If they went into a head-on clash, it would definitely mean their demise. There was no need for a fight to the death. Su Ran and the notionless saint also nodded in agreement. Those who would make major accomplishments should not bother with the details. This was a strategic retreat. There was nothing to be ashamed of. Ling Han paused slightly and then continued, "I want to use this opportunity to see who among them has malicious intentions. This kind of people, I will definitely not bring them into the celestial realm." Everyone knew that Ling Han valued relations. He had never gone back on his word once he agreed to something. When he agreed to become a core to merge the 2 realms, if this process was too slow, he would directly blast open the doors into the celestial realm and bring everyone with him into the celestial realm. However, if someone had the intention to bring him harm while taking advantage of him to enter into the celestial realm at the same time, that was something that Ling Han would not allow to happen. They all made their respective preparations. It was time for them to leave Wood Figure Planet. 2 days later, the Blue Feather Saint paid him a visit. He suggested to Ling Han that now that Ling Han had become a saint, he should make an attempt at becoming a core and merge the 2 realms. Ling Han considered for a moment, and then agreed to the other's request. In the first place, he had wanted to see how many people were having designs on him. Since the Blue Feather Saint had brought up such a request, he would go with the flow and give others a chance so that these scheming people would be revealed. The Rain Emperor and the others were naturally long since prepared, and they all entered into the Black Tower. As for the large Black Dogs group of 4 despicable characters, they had completely no intention of leaving. They only told Ling Han to come find them when he was ready to enter into the celestial realm. Ling Han rode a golden path and headed towards Cloud Apex Planet. This was the 2-realm battlefield that was closest to him. Now that he was a saint, there was naturally no need to use the cloud-piercing shuttle any longer. The golden path unfurled, and his speed was overwhelming. In an instant, he had left multiple stars behind him. It was just like how he had arrived through opening the sky of the lower realm in the past, circulated by the heaven and earth. The speed was also as fast as this. The speed of a saint was the fastest speed in the immortal realm. However, 3 golden paths actually shot over ahead of him all of a sudden. Though they did not collide with Ling Han, it could be clearly seen that along with these 3 golden paths, there were also 3 gigantic attacks. This was Saint King tier battle prowess, which had sealed Ling Han's course, and at this moment above him, below him, on his left, on his right, and behind him, 3 attacks shot over, and they were similarly of Saint King level. Ling Han actually encountered the attacks of 18 Saint Kings at the same time, which had sealed all possibility of him going ahead, going backwards or dodging in any direction. What to do now? Ling Han smiled calmly. He knew that he would be ambushed on the journey because he had already clearly expressed his intention to go to Cloud Apex Planet long ago. With a thought, he disappeared and entered into the Black Tower. Pung, 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 pung. As he disappeared, the 18 Saint King attacks suddenly crashed into each other, forming a terrifying storm in the universe. Thankfully, there were no planets in the surrounding area, or they would definitely be destroyed. When the storm had calmed, 18 Saint Kings appeared, all of them frowning deeply. They did not sense Ling Han's aura. It was as if he had never even existed. Chapter 1632. Refining Saint Grade Alchemical Pill. Chapter 1632. Refining Saint Grade Alchemical Pill. If they had killed Ling Han with that one strike, a rain of blood would have occurred by now. The 18 Saint Kings were all confused. That had been a fatal attack from each of them, and even if Ling Han had dodged into a spatial god tool, his death would have been inevitable. Yet now, it was frighteningly quiet all around them. This was too inconceivable. Inside the Black Tower, Ling Han was also surprised because these 18 Saint Kings were all completely unfamiliar to him. Just how many Saint Kings were there in the world? Ling Han was sure that these Saint Kings had all changed their appearances, and their motive was to leave a way of retreat for them. What if they were not able to kill Ling Han? Then it would be impossible for Ling Han to know who they were. They would still be able to ride on Ling Han's ship and enter into the celestial realm. Humph! He humphed coldly internally. Was there anything so good in this world? Appearances could be changed, but auras were difficult to change. Every cultivator had their unique aura. Usually they could control it from seeping out, but once they attacked, especially when it was done with their full strength, it would definitely be impossible to conceal any longer. Ling Han had already memorized the auras of these Saint Kings. The next time they met, he only had to force them to attack, and he would be able to distinguish if they were among the attackers today. Just you wait. There was no need for too long a period of time. Like the Empress, after he had completely stabilized his cultivation level, his strength at the peak stage of Small Saint, he would be able to match the peak stage of the Great Saint tier. Then, after he advanced into the Medium Saint tier, he would no longer have to be wary even if he was facing a Saint King. Even if he could not match a peak stage Saint King, with the strength of his physique, there was absolutely no need for him to fear. All the Saint Kings were not satisfied with just leaving, and sat cross-legged in the surrounding empty space. It was impossible for a man to suddenly disappear. Ling Han had to have hidden himself with some unknown means. It was very possible that it was a celestial tool. They refused to believe that he would be able to stay in it forever. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye a year had passed. It was as if Ling Han and his group had completely vanished from this world. The Open Clouds King was also one of the 18 Saint Kings that had ambushed Ling Han. He did not sense the reappearance of the link of karma all this while, and was sure that Ling Han was definitely still in this realm. To Saint Kings, even a wait for tens of thousands of years was nothing. They were determined to stand by and wait until Ling Han appeared once more. However, as time passed, the Saint Kings that had stayed behind on Woodfigure Planet naturally realized that Ling Han had not appeared on Cloud Apex Planet, and they all set off in search of him. Let's go! The 18 Saint Kings' expressions changed, and they swiftly left. If all the Saint Kings were here, then removing those Saint Kings that had come from the equation. Those that remained were only those who had ambushed Ling Han. It would be too easy to distinguish them. At present, they didn't even have any idea where Ling Han was, so they were naturally unwilling to expose their true identities. Immediately, they turned and left. Not too many days later, They appeared with their original appearances and pretended to have just found out something had happened, passing themselves off as part of the others who had genuinely no part in the ambush. Finally, all the saints left. This galaxy returned once more to a dark, cold, and solitary place. Within the Black Tower, Small Tower brought a piece of good news to Ling Han. The reincarnation tree had sprouted again and could be used once more. Experiencing rebirth after death, the reincarnation tree was also greatly improved. It could simultaneously accommodate as many as 100 people comprehending Tao, and one day of comprehension was equivalent to 100 years, which meant that the flow of time would be sped up by 30,000 times and more. Ling Han was overjoyed. Without the help of the reincarnation tree, his grasp of regulations in this 1 year had progressed pitifully slowly. He hurriedly began his comprehension of Tao beneath the tree, and the others did the same. They only knew how much the reincarnation tree had been of help to them after they had lost it. After a mere half-year's time, Ling Han had truly reached the peak of the small saint tier. This also meant that if he comprehended Tao in the outside world, he would need close to 20,000 years to do the same thing, so the value of the reincarnation tree was imaginable. After stabilizing his cultivation level, Ling Han did not rush to break through to the medium saint tier. His accumulation was not enough, so if he forcefully broke through, it would only result in death. And to possess enough accumulation, he would either have to settle for countless years and accumulate slowly for the final burst, or depend on alchemical pills. Only then would he be able to avoid having his vitality and life force sucked dry when he increased his cultivation level and had inadequate accumulation. Ling Han naturally chose the second option. Firstly, the first option was too slow, and secondly, he was the alchemy emperor. Was he an idiot not to take alchemical pills now? However, everything of Saint grade was difficult to grasp. Ling Han did not hurry to make his move. Instead, he made his preparation work so that he would first advance into Saint tier in terms of alchemy. Good tools were prerequisite to the successful execution of a job. Another year later, Ling Han finally stopped his probing into the path of alchemy. He already had a preliminary grasp and could attempt concocting Saint grade alchemical pills. However, to concoct Saint pills, there was need to use saintly medicine as the main ingredients. There were not many such ingredients in Ling Han's possession. Previously, in the treasure exchange, he had only managed to trade for 3. 3, if I'm lucky, I can refine 3 cauldrons worth of Saint grade alchemical pills, and even if all of them were a success, there would only be about 10. This is already enough. He and the Empress would each consume 5 pills, and that would be enough to satisfy the frightening demand for energy after they entered into medium saint tier. And once they became medium saints, they would no longer have to fear saint kings. They could completely go and rob the various lands of the great saints. Too bad, though the reincarnation tree was closer to celestial level, it would only be able to increase their comprehension. There was practically no effect on the increase of origin power. Otherwise, Ling Han would not be having such a headache. He began the concoction process cautiously. Because there were only 3 saintly medicines, there was definitely no error that could be allowed to happen. 3 months later, Ling Han had finished concocting the first cauldron of alchemical pills. They have succeeded, but their grade has not reached my expectations. Ling Han shook his head regretfully. However, succeeding upon his first time of concocting saint grade alchemical pills, his ability in alchemy was definitely top in the present immortal realm. Though the hardship alchemy saint had also concocted saint pills before, he had sacrificed 10 saintly medicines in the process, and he could not guarantee that it would succeed every single time. Thus, usually no one would use saintly medicines to concoct alchemical pills. Instead, they would be consuming them directly. Again, with experience from one successful attempt, Ling Han naturally was more confident and proficient. Half a year later, another 2 cauldrons of saint-grade alchemical pills were successfully concocted, and their grade improved with each subsequent cauldron. "There is really not enough time," he mused ruefully. He presently had already advanced to the saint tier, and could inscribe saint-grade killing formations in his body. But previously he had been focused on stabilizing his cultivation level of small saint tier, which was followed by his study of alchemy and concocting alchemical pills, and there had not been any time for him to focus on formations. Thankfully, he still had the reincarnation tree. Otherwise, he would definitely not have enough time to study formations in the next 100,000 years. "I can set formations to one side first. When I have become a medium saint, I will boost my grasp of formations in one go." Both he and the Empress made their final preparations. Then each took 5 saint-grade alchemical pills and appeared in the galaxy. They separated to avoid being mistakenly pulled into each other's heavenly tribulation. Who knew what a doubled heavenly tribulation would be like? And there was definitely no one who wanted to find out. They released their aura, and thunderclouds suddenly arrived. The whole universe became very repressed. When they broke through to the small saint tier, what they experienced was equivalent to the tribulation for a great saint, and now that they were advancing into medium saint tier, wouldn't have to be a tribulation for a saint king. Crack! 2 bolts of lightning struck towards Ling Han and the Empress, respectively, practically at the same time, and in this process, the 2 bolts of lightning all took human form. Wang, a frightening aura surged out. It was actually Saint King tier. Chapter 1633. Drinking the Heavenly Tribulation Fluid. Chapter 1633. Drinking the Heavenly Tribulation Fluid. The Empress directly ejected her 9 doppelgangers, receiving the attacks of the Heavenly Tribulation. She had always been aggressive and assertive, and now that there were no outsiders here, she naturally had no need to worry that her trump cards would be known to others. From the beginning, her battle prowess was on full throttle, and she was beating the lightning giant. So what if it was Saint King tier? In front of the present Empress, it was no longer in a lofty, superior position, but rather was an opponent that she could face and even suppress. Ling Han, though, was not as relaxed as the Empress. He still had to allow his godly bones to be tempered, but the gap in cultivation level was too wide. He did not dare to shatter his own body like he had done in the past. Instead, he received the power of lightning directly into his body and used a more moderate method to temper his godly bones. But if anyone had seen it, they would definitely exclaim loudly that he was a freak. He called that moderate. That was an attack from a Saint King tier, and you were actually using it to temper your body. Were you tired of living? This husband and wife were definitely freaks among freaks. One easily endured the heavenly tribulation, while the other treated the heavenly tribulation like a natural furnace to temper himself. Unfortunately, Ling Han did not dare to enter deeply into the tribulation clouds to get more heavenly tribulation fluid this time round. His present battle prowess was only capable of matching the early stage of Saint King tier. But if he entered into the depths of the tribulation clouds, not only would there be peak stage Saint Kings, their number was frighteningly high too. His present physique still could not hold up to the barrage from so many Saint Kings. Perhaps he would be able to make an attempt when he next broke through to the Saint King tier. After the heavenly tribulation, Ling Han and the Empress exchanged a smile. At present, they were confident enough to face all their strong enemies in the ancient realm. It was the ancient realm, not just the immortal realm. That was because they had simultaneously cultivated the regulations of the 2 realms, which were perfectly merged. Whether it was the immortal realm or the netherworld, they could completely release their full battle prowess. "Are we going to seek out those guys immediately for vengeance?" the Empress asked. Ling Han considered for a moment and then answered, "No, let's try to merge the regulations of the 2 realms first. If the ancient realm could really be merged in our hands, that would be a great merit, and the benefits we obtain would be indescribably generous. In the past, he had come through opening the sky, and had thus been rewarded by the heaven and earth. His power had been a whole 3 stars stronger than his peers in the shattering void tier, and there were too many small worlds. You could open the sky, and so could I, but for the ancient realm, there was only one. Since opening the sky of a small world was already so amazing, then if they merged the 2 realms, how nature-defying would their merit be? The Empress nodded. They were both people who were determined to become celestial kings, so it was naturally better for their battle prowess among their peers to be stronger. The 2 of them entered into the Black Tower. The Empress stabilized her cultivation level, while Ling Han still had to set out again on his path of formations in addition to stabilizing his cultivation level. Ling Han had already accumulated enough on the path of formations. When he had unraveled tens of thousands of formations in a mystery realm, his foundations had also become incredibly deep and resounding, and added with his frequently discussing formations with the Tranquil Heart Saint, his knowledge of formations was actually not inferior to the Tranquil Heart Saints any longer, aside from saint-level formations. He focused on studying. Time passed under the reincarnation tree. In the outside world, 3 years had passed, and underneath the reincarnation tree, 100,000 had passed. Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open. He had advanced into the saint tier in formations. However, the Tranquil Heart Saint was only a small saint. Thus, his knowledge of formations also stopped at the level of small saint tier. The experience related to formations that he had taught to Ling Han was also only limited to the small saint tier. To Ling Han, was there any more meaning to small saint tier formations? No. However, he still had celestial level formations. With his present godly bones, it was naturally impossible for them to bear the might of celestial level formations. Furthermore, even if they could, he would not be able to activate a celestial level formation, either, as he didn't have the ability at all. However, celestial level formations could be used as reference, so wouldn't it work with a slightly weaker version? He went into another long period of seclusion. A year had passed, and he had disassembled a portion of a celestial level formation. Its strength was comparable to the peak stage Great Saint tier. Ling Han inscribed the formation patterns on his godly bones with the 9 heavens flame as his blade. If he did not depend on the might of formations, his battle prowess was comparable to the early stage of Great Saint tier, and if he activated the formations, then he would not have to fear even peak stage Saint Kings. He broke into a smile. These 4 years had been worthwhile. After entering into the Saint tier, there was practically no alchemical pill in this world that could allow him to swiftly boost his cultivation level. If it was not for the fact that he had cultivated to the pinnacle at the Eternal River tier, and entered into the peak stage of the low extreme upon breaking through to the Genesis tier, he would probably have been unable to fully cultivate to even the early stage of the small saint tier now. Just take a look at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. She was still advancing with much difficulty in the early stage of the small saint tier, and completely did not have the sharp progress that she had once had. Furthermore, this was also taking into account that she had the inheritance from the 3 Phoenix Kings, and her cultivation rate was much faster than any other saints. By now, if he wanted their cultivation rates to speed up, there was only saintly medicine left, but how many saintly medicines were there in the entire ancient realm? Ling Han was now stuck in a dilemma. On one hand, he wanted to cultivate to the Saint King tier in the ancient realm. Then he would be able to enter into the depths of the thunderclouds another time and collect the heavenly tribulation fluid. On the other hand, he also wanted to enter quickly into the celestial realm. With how bountiful the resources of the celestial realm were, there would definitely be countless saintly medicine, and even celestial medicine was possible. Ling Han pondered deeply for a while and made his decision. When I undergo the great saint tribulation, I will enter into the depths of the tribulation clouds to collect heavenly tribulation fluid again. I'm sure that with my strength then, there should still be some hope. If it is possible, I will see who would be undergoing a heavenly tribulation, and take the initiative to draw the might of the heavenly tribulation to me, so I can harvest to my heart's content. This is not a bad idea. In any case, I will have to reach the great Saint Tyr to be able to open the doors to the celestial realm. Let's see exactly what benefits the heavenly tribulation fluid can bring first. Ling Han drew out the heavenly tribulation fluid and took a small sip. Suddenly, his whole body was blazing with lightning, and it was as if his entire body would be turned into lightning. He could clearly feel that there was lightning raging in his body. His godly bones couldn't hold up at all, and were beginning to crumble. Gasp! It was too violent. It should be known that he presently was a medium saint, and the strength of his godly bones had soared up to the strength of level 20 godly metal. Even if it was not as strong as that, it would not be too far off, either, yet they were actually beginning to collapse under the force of the lightning. As expected, if I were to barge into the depths of the thunderclouds at this moment, that would only be an act to court death, Ling Han mumbled in a trembling voice. Small Tower was also right in not allowing me to share the heavenly tribulation fluid with others. For those below celestial level, I should be the only one that can bear such a barrage. Even the Empress would not be able to, though she could distribute any attack that she sustained. Drinking the heavenly tribulation fluid meant that lightning would be running berserk directly in one's body. Her 9 doppelgangers would have no use at all. Ling Han gritted his teeth and channeled the indestructible heaven scroll with all his might. Now he was already a medium saint, and after channeling the indestructible heaven scroll, what level of strength would his physique be capable of reaching? His godly bones were slowly beginning to heal. This violent power of lightning actually did not manage to cause the slightest damage to him. However, the time that this kind of condition could be maintained was limited. After 30 minutes, Ling Han released a sharp cry. Pa, 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 pa. The godly bones that he had just healed shattered once again. His skin split and blood sprayed out madly. Damn, he had clearly only taken a small sip. But why was its might so powerful? Damn, stupid Small Tower. Why hadn't it said clearly from the beginning? This was not a small sip. He had to take a small sip of a small sip. You Tsundra Tower, if I don't throw you into the toilet in future, I will take your surname. Ling Han shouted out in pain. Chapter 1634. 2 Mystical Powers. Chapter 1634. 2 Mystical Powers. Slightly less than half a day later, the lightning's might had finally passed, which was a little similar to the heavenly tribulation. Ling Han had already turned completely into mud, and this was still because he had cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll. Otherwise, there was definitely no Genesis tier in this world that would dare drink the heavenly tribulation fluid so directly like this. However, after the pain, the benefits were here. The great Tao of lightning element unfurled in Ling Han's mind, but it was not complete. It was formed from countless shards. However, there were some shards that were larger, and there were some shards that were so small that they could not be seen with the naked eye. Being incomplete was normal. After all, this was heavenly tribulation fluid that had only been obtained in the ancient realm, so there naturally was an upper limit to it. To Ling Han, this was actually already enough. He would not be able to grasp regulations of great Tao that were too profound anyways. Time was limited, and Ling Han chose the large pieces for comprehension. Regulations were difficult to comprehend in the first place. What more when they were in an incomplete state? Thus, this naturally meant that he had to find relatively complete larger pieces for comprehension. For Ling Han's present cultivation level, the larger pieces were just right. A day passed, and Ling Han had comprehended Tao for an entire century underneath the reincarnation tree. He opened his eyes, yet had absolutely no intention of standing up. He took another small sip of the heavenly tribulation fluid, but now that he had experience, he took a considerably smaller sip. Even so, he was still horribly tormented. Though divine demon sword had not yet become a celestial tool, even a severing mundane ancestor would not be able to look down on the strength of its destructive ability. The heavenly tribulation fluid was similar. Though Ling Han had only taken a tiny sip, its destructive ability was still incredibly violent. After a day, Ling Han took another sip. Underneath the reincarnation tree, he split the heavenly tribulation fluid into a few hundred portions. After a whole year, he finally managed to drink all these portions of heavenly tribulation fluid, and he had also advanced by leaps and bounds in terms of the lightning element Great Tao. Extermination lightning. Lightning flash. Ling Han had gained 2 mystical powers in total. They could also be considered celestial techniques because he had a feeling that once he unlocked the upper limit of his cultivation level, these 2 techniques could be strengthened and continue to increase their might. The extermination lightning was a bit like the power of lightning that he had obtained through observing the heavenly tribulation, but observing only allowed him to make an imitation. It was a different story now. He had truly gained the core power of the heavenly tribulation. Lightning could destroy the world as it represented divine punishment. Even saint kings would have to fear it. It could be cast alone, or he could also embed it into the lightning sword technique to replace the original power of lightning so that its might would be improved to another level. And lightning flash could allow his speed to be as swift as the lightning of the heavenly tribulation. What kind of concept was this? The speed of the heavenly tribulation was something that no one could possibly manage to dodge, and they could only receive it head-on. And Ling Han had learnt this kind of extreme speed, which meant that whether he was pursuing an enemy or using it to flee from a powerful foe, it would be a piece of cake for him. I can't maintain this kind of extreme speed for very long, Ling Han said to himself. However, it would be enough for pursuit and escaping from a siege. Actually, this is a little like the thunderclap ninth heaven, but it surpasses the latter by who knows how many times. And now to the 2-realm battlefield. If the open clouds king chase is over, I can just use him as a testing dummy. However, since I killed Zhong Badu, I have already undergone the heavenly tribulation twice, and the link of karma should have already disappeared. His link of karma had vanished, but the Empress's had not. After she eliminated Zhongyi, she had only gone through the heavenly tribulation once. Ho ho, open clouds king, do you dare to come? Ling Han exited the Black Tower and unfurled a golden path, heading towards Cloud Apex Planet. He was almost close to arriving, and he immediately received a piece of good news. The Rain Emperor had broken through. Saint Tyr. The Rain Emperor greeted the heavenly tribulation in the galaxy. It was very straining on him. On one hand, it was because he had also merged the regulations of the 2 realms like how Ling Han and the Empress had. It was clearly only supposed to be a small saint tribulation, yet its might was comparable to a great saint tribulation. Yet the Rain Emperor had not cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll or the 9 deaths heaven art, nor did he have a celestial king technique for protection, so he naturally almost died. But the Rain Emperor's toughness was extraordinarily shocking. No matter how much he was struck, he would not collapse. He would always find the slightest chance of survival in a situation of complete hopelessness. He just barely survived this half a day's time and successfully advanced into the Genesis tier. Furthermore, his accumulation of origin power had directly spiked to the peak stage of the small saint tier. And it was just the 3 of them. Even Ding Ping and Juyao, the 2 disciples that Ling Han valued highly, did not have such astonishing natural talent. However, they had formed about 5 million stars, but had already stagnated for a very, very long time. Most likely, it would be very difficult for them to take another step forwards. Ling Han, the Empress, and the Rain Emperor simultaneously entered into the 2-realm battlefield. If they could boost the merging of the 2 realms, then they would be rewarded by the heaven and earth. They naturally would not throw away this kind of benefit. But none of them had any experience in merging 2 realms, and could only fumble around on their own. As the three investigated, they attempted various methods and gradually gained experience. They could feel that the heaven and earth of both realms were calling out to them, as if they were expressing a longing to them. As expected, the two realms were indeed advancing in the direction of merging, but with how destruction and creation were on two opposing sides, this rate of merging was chillingly slow. Going by the normal course of events, the reincarnation tree might already normally grow to its full potential, and these two realms would be still slowly dawdling towards each other. The three of them took the roles of cores, and using themselves as a bridge, they connected the two realms. Suddenly, three pillars of light shot skywards in the two-realm battlefield. Whether it was the immortal realm or the netherworld, they could all see clearly. The heaven and earth close to this area was trembling, as if an astonishing change was about to take place. The merging of the two realms was speeding up. Ling Han and the others exchanged looks, all of them looking pleasantly surprised. Because they were acting as bridges, they had one hand connected to the netherworld, and the other was connected to the immortal realm. The regulations of the two realms were circulating inside their bodies, which was swiftly increasing their comprehension of cultivation level, and the accumulation of their origin power was also increasing. With every passing breath, a star would be born in their dantian. Even if there was no reward from the heaven and earth after the two realms had merged, this kind of benefit was already great enough. It was at this moment that a figure arrived through a tear in space, exuding an endless might. The expressions of Ling Han and the others changed drastically. This person was too strong, actually giving off a feeling that they were completely no match for that individual. Ling Han grabbed the Empress and the Rain Emperor without hesitation, and had instantly arrived at an endless distance away in a flash of lightning. However, he did not even manage to get his breath back when he saw that person actually rapidly pursued them at a speed that was not very much slower than Ling Han. Furthermore, looking at the relaxed and easy way it was done, it was definitely not like how Ling Han could only have a momentary burst of speed. "Don't be nervous. I have come under the command of the young Imperial Empress," the person said, and the chaotic aura over the person dissipated, showing the true appearance. This was a woman who looked to be in her 30s. Her appearance definitely could not be considered pretty. In fact, she couldn't even be called plain. She was truthfully a little ugly. Meanwhile, Ling Han hesitated for a moment before subconsciously asking, "Who knew?" "The young Imperial Empress has been bestowed with the name Tianyin," the woman said solemnly, her expression reverent, as if there was presently a powerful figure standing in front of her. Ling Han wore a strange expression. He was starting to believe that this woman had been sent by Hunyo. The reason was very simple. She was ugly. How could the little jealous lover possibly send a beauty to meet with him? Chapter 1635. Merging the two realms is forbidden by the celestial realm. Chapter 1635. Merging the two realms is forbidden by the celestial realm. Though Ling Han was already beginning to believe the identity of this person, he still dared not have the slightest bit of carelessness. One should never be on alert, and it was best to be careful. If she showed the slightest bit of malice, he would bring the Empress and the Rain Emperor with him into the Black Tower. "Hunyo asked you to come? What is it?" Ling Han asked. The woman seriously answered, "You must stop what you have been doing just now, merging the two realms." Ling Han was surprised. "Why? I, too, am unsure of the exact reason, but this is something that the young Imperial Empress has implored over and over again." The young Imperial Empress said that merging the two realms would draw out a great number of elites, and even the Rock Palace would not be able to protect you, the woman said, a sliver of loathing in her eyes. Going by the young Imperial Empress's tone, however much trouble this man created, the Rock Palace would still protect him at all costs. Just how noble was the young Imperial Empress, and she would actually take such great risks for an insignificant damn man like this. Naturally, she despised Ling Han. Ling Han ignored this woman and frowned slightly. The merging of the two realms would actually alert the mighty figures of the celestial realm. According to the information he had obtained, the reason that the ancient realm had been split into two was firstly ineffable. It had been split in two, which caused resulting effects on the celestial realm, and sparked the great turmoil of the celestial realm. Secondly, the great turmoil took place in the celestial realm, which spread to the ancient realm, and thus caused the splitting of the ancient realm in two. And now the mighty figures of the celestial realm actually wanted to interfere and stop the merging of the ancient realm. Ling Han pondered quietly. If this was the celestial realm, anyone would be able to become the core of the merging of the two realms as long as they had reached the Genesis tier. And with the background of the celestial realm, this could increase to a few 100 million, right? Then the merging of the two realms would actually be something very simple. If it was claimed that when severing mundane tiers and stronger elites entered into the ancient realm for too long and suffered backlash, so their lifespans were no longer endless, Genesis tiers were not affected. Furthermore, merging the two realms would still be rewarded by the heaven and earth, and they would obtain great benefits. Why had this not been done by any force of the celestial realm? The reason was just as this woman had said. A mighty figure of the celestial realm forbade it. The Rock Palace was a celestial king-level force. So if even Hunyo had to deliberately send someone to inform him, what did this signify? The level of this mighty figure had to have reached celestial king tier, and the Rock Palace was unable to override him. During the great turmoil of the celestial realm, it had involved great battles among celestial king tiers, and now it was a celestial king that forbade the ancient realm from merging. Could it be that it had really been the celestial realm that had split the ancient realm in two? The reason why there had been a battle among the celestial kings was because some celestial kings disagreed with this action, which resulted in a conflict of ideas and finally culminated in the great turmoil of the celestial realm. Finally, the celestial kings that had objected had lost, and the ancient realm had still been split in two. Though this was only Ling Han's deduction, he felt that this was practically the truth. But why was the ancient realm so important? It clearly could not possibly produce severing mundane tiers. At most, one would be able to blast open the doors to the celestial realm when they had reached the great saint tier. Ling Han felt like he had touched the truth, yet even more mysteries were surrounding him, so he was unable to plug the holes in his deduction. The young Imperial Empress has commanded me to secretly protect you all this while, so this is the first time I have appeared, for the sake of stopping you. However, your merging of the two realms has already attracted the notice of the celestial realm. Next time, I may not be the first person to arrive here, the woman continued, though she disliked him, who asked this to be the command of the young Imperial Empress. The command of the young Imperial Empress had to be completed fully. You definitely cannot merge the two realms, or that would be merely courting your own death, the woman said. There was one other matter that she did not say, and that was that if elites of the celestial realm wanted to deal with Ling Han, Hunyo would lead the Rock Palace to snipe them down. But in that way, it was equivalent to pushing the Rock Palace onto the opposing side of the various large sects of the celestial realm. Even such a powerful force like the Rock Palace could possibly be destroyed in a single night celestial king-level forces had been raised before, after all. Hunyo forbade her from saying so. Ling Han nodded. He could guess that if there was someone from the celestial realm targeting him, Hunyo would definitely stop them, and based on the information he had grasped, the Rock Palace still had powerful enemies eyeing them covetously. He would definitely not put Hunyo into danger. I understand, he answered in a low voice. Though merging the two realms would bring him great benefits, he was more unwilling for Hunyo to put her life on the line for his sake. The woman gave Ling Han a profound look, and only then did her hands tug at the space in front of her, tearing a hole right in space. Her figure entered the rip and vanished. This was an elite that was at least in the severing mundane tier. As for what exact level she was at, Ling Han and the others could not guess at all. She was too powerful. Ling Han and the others exchanged looks. None of them had imagined that there lay so much danger in the merging of the two realms. The celestial realm actually forbids the merging of the two realms. I already had my suspicions previously. Clearly, the celestial realm's regulations are complete, and any Genesis tier would be able to do the job. Yet, why has it never been put into action? I initially thought that it was because they were looking down on the ancient realm. I never thought that there was a strict command from a celestial king that would not allow anyone to do such a thing. Could it be that they are afraid of the ancient realm? This was inconceivable, even if everyone had cultivated to the peak stage of the Saint King tier in the ancient realm. So what? Perhaps only one severing mundane ancestor would be enough to deal with all of them. It was only a matter of time. It was unexplainable and completely illogical. Ling Han nodded. No matter how it is, the merging of the two realms is impossible. Let's return to Wood Figure Planet first. Hopefully, those Saint Kings have not fled, so we can call them for an accounting. The three of them rode their respective golden paths, heading in the direction of Wood Figure Planet. Though Ling Han could increase his speed endlessly, that was to be used in battle. It was too much of a waste to use it for a journey, and he couldn't maintain that kind of speed very long. Around 10 days later, they had returned to Wood Figure Planet. Suddenly, a great many saints approached them. There was the Star Sand Saint and the other 10 saints, as well as other Saint Kings that had stayed here. They had had no news of Ling Han for a good many years. "Friend Ling, where have you gone all these years?" these Saint Kings asked. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and he involuntarily smirked internally. These people were really good at pretending. They were clearly the culprits that had ambushed him a few years ago, yet now they were playing dumb. Ho-ho! Did they think that he would easily overlook the matter? "The two realms cannot be merged," he said, and did not reveal the fact that this was a warning from the celestial realm, so that these people would not question the matter closely. There is only one other option left, and that is for me to blast open the doors to the celestial realm when I become a great saint and bring some people with me to the celestial realm. A moment of commotion rose up among the Saint Kings. The two realms actually could not be merged. Though they were disappointed, the feeling was not too strong, because there was still another option of entering into the celestial realm with Ling Han. In any case, there were not many of them that had broad-minded and open nature to think of the interest of the whole world. It was already enough for them to be able to bring their own clans with them into the celestial realm. Ling Han glanced at them and said, "However, I am not duty-bound to help you guys for free. Those that want to enter into the celestial realm, come and buy your tickets. If I am satisfied, I will bring you with me into the celestial realm." When these words were spoken, a considerable number of Saint Kings were immediately angered. Just what kind of noble status did they have? Previously, they deigned to treat Ling Han as an equal, and that had been giving him a lot of face already. Yet now he actually still wanted them to buy tickets. They gave him an inch, and he became insufferably arrogant. Chapter 1636, Turning Hostile. Chapter 1636, Turning Hostile. "Ling Han, you've gone too far," the primordial Saint King immediately rebuked. "Gone too far, your sister." With an angry exclamation, the large black dog appeared. It stood on its hind legs, twisting its behind, its iron underwear polished to an incredibly smooth extent. It was reflecting light in an incredibly showy manner. Yet it did not feel any shame at all. It walked over airily and pointed at the Saint Kings. "Did you hear the words of Grandpa Dog's little brother? Hand over some benefits. Or don't even one of you think of entering into the celestial realm. Are you all Grandpa Dog's sons or grandsons? Just calling me Grandpa Dog, and you think I will take you all into the celestial realm? No way." The saints were all enraged, and the primordial Saint King's personality was the most ruthless. He immediately moved to aim a palm strike at the large black dog. "Save me!" The large black dog broke into a run and arrived behind Ling Han. Stretching out a paw, it pointed at the primordial Saint King. "If you have the guts, have a one-on-one duel with Grandpa Dog's little brother for 300 rounds. If there is even 1 round less, you are Grandpa Dog's grandson." The primordial Saint King was so furious his hair was fluttering wildly. He again grabbed out at the large black dog. His target was very clear. He was not targeting Ling Han at all. Pum! Yet Ling Han shot out a punch, which struck this large hand and countered this strike. "Junior, what is the meaning of this?" The primordial Saint King's eyes were cold. In the first place, he was already very displeased with having to treat a junior as his equal. Yet this junior was actually creating difficulties now, which made him even more furious. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Out of those 16 old dogs who had ambushed me, you were one of them, weren't you?" "Woof, don't insult your Grandpa Dog." The large black dog immediately turned hostile, and with a snap, it aimed a bite at Ling Han's bottom. The Empress made her move. "Paw!" The large black dog was instantly sent flying and was smacked dizzy. The primordial Saint King's expression changed, but he said, "Junior, what nonsense are you blabbering?" Ling Han swept an eye over the gathered saints and said, "I am actually a very amicable person, and since all of us are peers of the ancient realm, I do not mind bringing you all with me into the celestial realm. But you all, ho-ho! There are some people that are really despicable and wish to snatch the good fortune that belongs to me. I am not that dumb to still be giving benefits to those that have betrayed me. Those Saint Kings that have made a move on me must give me an explanation. Otherwise, do not blame me for starting a massacre and slaughtering the forbidden lands." This was an undisguised threat. All the Saint Kings exchanged looks. Some of them had expressions of dawning realization. No wonder Ling Han had not appeared in these many years. Some of them bore ugly expressions. They had not killed Ling Han with a single strike all those years ago, which had left behind such a massive threat to them. But no one made a sound. A great many Saint Kings that had attacked all those years ago were still hopeful. At the time, they had changed their appearances, so Ling Han might not be able to recognize them. The primordial Saint King, meanwhile, smirked coldly. "Junior, you no longer have the trump card to kill Saint Kings, and you still dare be arrogant." He could not hold himself back from making a move. He naturally knew that Ling Han had identified his aura, and thus simply did not choose to conceal himself any longer. "Brat Han, kill him. You don't have to give me any face." The large black dog immediately jumped out. "Despicable dog, I am definitely going to fill you today." The primordial Saint King aimed a glare at the large black dog, his killing intent blazing. Ling Han humphed and mocked, "What awe-inspiring authority!" The primordial Saint King smirked coldly. "Then I will first kill this despicable dog, and then force out all your secrets." "Stop!" The blue feather Saint King immediately stepped out to stop him. "Ling Han indeed has no duty to bring us into the celestial realm. That is a path towards immortality. This kind of kindness can be considered as heavy as a mountain, and no matter what price we have to pay, it will be worth it. Brother Blue Feather, what need is there for such anger? Come, it has been a long time since our last spar. Why don't we come and exchange a few blows?" Another Saint King spoke up, standing in the path of the blue feather Saint King, and not giving him any chance of lending a helping hand. Wang, a silvery river appeared. In a single moment, the primordial Saint King had entered his strongest battle condition. His great Tao took the form of a long river that surged on him, as if he himself was the heaven and earth. He struck out with a palm strike, attacking both Ling Han and the large black dog at the same time. This strike was seemingly attacking the large black dog primarily, and Ling Han was only a secondary target. But the truth was that the destructive power aimed at the both of them was more or less equal. He did not mind striking Ling Han dead along with a large black dog. Then he would immediately pluck out and search his soul to obtain all the secrets the latter possessed. Ling Han's figure moved swiftly and suddenly became a flash of lightning. In a moment when the Saint Kings were all completely unguarded and did not anticipate it, he had already appeared in front of the primordial Saint King. He shot out a punch, the 9 heavens flame burning on his fist. Pooh! It was as if the primordial Saint King's defense was completely useless. Ling Han's fist directly sank into his face. The immortal flame blazed, instantly burning his spirit into nothing. A grand Saint King, who had cultivated for who knew how many years to have obtained the fruits of cultivation that he had had today, had died in such a tragic way, his head blown apart with a single punch. There was no dignity in his death at all. Ling Han withdrew his fist, and under the burning of the immortal flame, there was not a single smear of blood on his fist. What? A Saint King had actually been killed instantly with a single punch in a head-on confrontation. All the Saint Kings were indescribably stunned, and a feeling of coldness rose up in their bodies. Ling Han's power and aura were clearly normal, but why was he able to kill a Saint King with a single punch? What is most frightening is his speed, which surpasses the level of Saint King. It is as if a heavenly tribulation has descended. It was this kind of extreme speed which caught the primordial Saint King completely off guard, and he was struck directly by his fist. Additionally, the flame that is burning on his fist is also incredibly frightening. It actually tore a hole directly in the primordial Saint King's defenses and killed him a single strike. Extreme speed added with this kind of frightening attack power. So what if his cultivation level is not high? Who would be able to stop him? Fighting with him means that one has to constantly stay fully on defensive, and only then would he be able to stop his attack. That's right. The Saint Kings whispered among themselves. Aside from a limited few peak stage Saint Kings, the others were all uneasy. Faced with Ling Han's extreme speed, anyone would be struck if they were the slightest bit careless. The primordial Saint King's mistake was a lesson for them. He did not even have the chance to show his full strength, and he had already been killed. Ling Han proficiently removed the primordial Saint King's spatial spirit tool and god tools, casually stuffing them into his pockets. Spatial god tools could not be stored into spatial spirit tools or another spatial god tool, so it could not be placed in the Black Tower. Hence, he simply stuffed them all into his pockets. All the Saint Kings were gritting their teeth at this scene. You haven't just done this a few times, have you? You look too accustomed to it. Ling Han looked towards the other Saint Kings. This is the last chance. All those who made a move on me previously, step out. One should be responsible for one's actions. Otherwise, I do not mind killing you all first, and then charging off to attack your home bases. What arrogant words! Another few Saint Kings stepped out. Though Ling Han's extreme speed was astonishing, and that flame's destructive ability was frightening, he was only a small saint after all. He was already a medium saint. Only now did they realize that Ling Han had actually advanced into the medium saint tier. This was too inconceivable. 10 years ago, he had just broken through to the small saint tier, yet had already become a medium saint by now. This speed of advancing through the cultivation levels was too frightening, and was something that no one could believe at all. Even if you had consumed celestial medicine, it could not have possibly been so fast. And the rest? Ling Han asked calmly. There were 16 in total, and now that one is dead, there should still be 15 shameless old dogs. Woof! The large black dog barked at Ling Han in displeasure. When these words were out, another 10 Saint Kings walked out, and added with those Saint Kings that had previously stepped out, they totaled exactly 15. Chapter 1637, Battle Royale Breaks Out. Chapter 1637, Battle Royale Breaks Out. The eyes of these 15 Saint Kings were cold. As they saw it, As long as Ling Han no longer had the trump card to kill Saint Kings, then they could not possibly be wary of him in the slightest. The present Ling Han was indeed very strong, but that strength was based on his extreme speed and the power of his flame. His personal battle prowess was only that bit, and there was no need for them to be afraid. Since they had now turned completely hostile, it was a good thing, too. They'd just battle it out then. 15 seniors that had matured for many years would actually go on to bully a junior. Do you all still have any shame? The blue feather Saint King stepped out, standing by Ling Han's side. I am also very unconvinced. Another Saint King stepped out, choosing to support Ling Han. At the end, there were a total of 9 Saint Kings that chose to stand together with Ling Han, and another 7 Saint Kings chose to help neither side. Friends, what need is there to waste time on a junior? An opposing Saint King asked, trying to draw a wedge between them. This boy must have hidden a great secret. As long as we can apprehend him, with our abilities, we will be able to grasp all of them in a few million years at most. With our remaining lifespan, it would be no problem for us to live another several 100 million years. So why don't we take his good fortune for our own, and break into the celestial realm with our own ability? Don't claim that you all have never had the thought. This boy must have obtained the secret technique of a celestial king that has died years ago. Otherwise, how could he possibly be this strong? This is a celestial king technique we're talking about. Friends, are you all just going to watch helplessly as this wonderful great fortune slips out of your hands right in front of you? The blue feather Saint King humphed and declared, We have all reached the Saint King tier. So why don't you all have the slightest bit of integrity? Speaking of your shameless behavior in such a self-righteous manner, you all are really thick-skinned. Humph, when words get sour, what need is there to talk further? One of the Saint Kings was more hot-tempered. Let's pick out 9 of us to stand against the 9 of them, and the remaining ones will work together to kill that boy. Then there will naturally be nothing else that needs to be said. That's right. The opposing Saint Kings nodded, and soon 9 of their number stepped out, focusing on the blue feather Saint King and the other 8 Saint Kings, while the remaining 6 Saint Kings were targeting Ling Han. The Open Clouds King was also among them. He was the first to make his move. Boom! The power of time surged, making one have doubts whether he had come from the future or from the past. It was incredibly bizarre. Ling Han's figure moved, but he had just taken one step when he realized that it was as if he had slipped into mud, his speed actually dropping a good few times. Though he was still slightly faster than the Saint Kings, his advantage was not the slightest bit obvious now. Ho-ho, it's a technique that you have used in front of us once. Could it be that you think you can enjoy its effects a second time? The Open Clouds King sneered. It was the power of time that he had unleashed that had slowed down the flow of time around Ling Han so that his speed would also become slower. He broke out in a slight sweat. Ling Han's strength spiked into the early stage of the Saint King tier, and even if he was a peak stage Saint King, it was still very straining for him to restrict Ling Han's speed. This could not possibly be maintained for too long a period of time. Charge! All the Saint Kings made their moves 9 saints against 9 saints, while the remaining 6 shot their attacks towards Ling Han. They wanted to take advantage of this time when his speed was hindered to kill him. Ling Han sneered. Wang, his killing formations, activated. Xiao, xiao, xiao! A frightening light shot out from his body, instantly rending the flow of time to pieces. All techniques in this world had to obey an ironclad rule. When power was strong to a certain extent, techniques would become completely meaningless. Faced with Ling Han's killing formations, even the Open Clouds King's power of time could not show its might. Damn it! The Open Clouds King cursed. To be honest, his battle prowess was not the slightest bit inferior to Ling Han's, but it would take too much from him to be able to trap Ling Han from such a long distance. However, he did not dare to take the risk to fight Ling Han at close quarters. What if he was killed? If he had been that kind of courageous character, Why would he have hidden in his forbidden land and not come out all these years? Why would he have established his forbidden land in such a remote, distant location? Ling Han had escaped and immediately channeled the immovable deity metal body mystical power, creating another 4 arms that simultaneously channeled different celestial techniques and charged towards the open clouds king. The first he was going to kill was going to be this person. Firstly, this would fulfill his promise to the Heavenly River King, and secondly, the threat that this person posed to him was also considerably big. After all, time was one of the strongest regulations of the world. It was even able to hinder his extreme speed. Don't even think about it. The other 5 Saint Kings were not to be trifled with either. They used their respective powerful techniques, which blasted towards Ling Han. With a battle cry, Ling Han shot into the air and took the initiative to relocate their battle. Otherwise, if they went full out in battle here, Figure Planet would definitely be destroyed. Charge! The 6 Saint Kings set off in rapid pursuit. One after another, attacks blasted out, stimulating the great Tao. The light of regulations danced wildly. Saint Kings were the strongest existence in the immortal realm, and every attack they delivered would resonate with the heaven and earth. Ling Han had no more reservations, and turned around to charge at the 6 Saint Kings. Various celestial techniques were unleashed from his hands, stunning all the saints. How could one man simultaneously use so many different celestial techniques? But the most frightening thing was still those 2 swords that were channeling the lightning sword technique. There were too many celestial techniques fused in them, and they could sever the heavens directly. But Ling Han's personal battle prowess was only in the early stage of the Saint King tier. Even with his killing formations activated, he could only match a peak stage Saint King, and this was not power that truly belonged to him, so it was inevitable that he could not use it as well he pleased, especially in a battle of this grade. Immediately, he realized that killing formations were only killing formations. After all, there was still a great difference between them and his own personal battle prowess. At that moment, the battle was stuck in a stalemate. But all the Saint Kings were already struck dumb with shock. This was Ling Han's genuine battle prowess, and unlike using some kind of trump card, there was no time limit to it. Instead, he could fight on like this without end. To force a Saint King to battle to exhaustion, no matter how fierce the battle was, it was completely no problem for him to last a few hundred years. And this was a few hundred years' time. Even if Ling Han was not their match in the end, couldn't he find some opening to flee? Oh no! The rising of this young saint could no longer be stopped. He was already so powerful at present. After a few more years, the whole ancient realm would have to treat him with respect. Charge! All the Saint King's expressions were icy cold. This was the last chance. If they still could not kill Ling Han this time, then there would not be any more chances left for them in future. In the galaxy, the bloody battle surged on. One side, Ling Han wanted to kill these Saint Kings that bore malicious intent towards him. And on the other, these Saint Kings also wanted to kill him, both to remove the threat permanently and to obtain a gigantic profit. Neither side was willing to retreat. Various celestial techniques were unleashed, lighting up the whole galaxy. Even those that were a few galaxies away could see that blinding light. Multiple shock waves that filled one's heart with fear spread out. They were strong enough to travel for tens of thousands of years before all their energy had been exhausted. Ling Han bathed in blood, covered with injuries. The people he was facing were 6 Saint Kings, and though only 2 of them had reached the peak stage, the combined force of 6 Saint Kings were still an extremely great threat for him. Sustaining one strike from them was enough to make him throw up blood. And even a physique that was close to the toughness of level 20 godly metal did not have very good defensive effects against such power. But the 6 Saint Kings were not that much better off. He had torn off an arm and a leg, respectively, from 2 Saint Kings in the early stage, punched a hole through the torso of a middle stage Saint King, and pierced the lower abdomen of a late-stage Saint King with a broken wooden sword. The latter was forced to give up and sever his lower body, or both his form and spirit would be destroyed. Chapter 1638. Pursuing the Open Clouds King. Chapter 1638. Pursuing the Open Clouds King. In a battle of 6 against 1, with 2 of them being peak stage Saint Kings, they finally managed to get the upper hand. When they fought to the 10th day, Ling Han's injuries had also worsened to the extent that he could no longer fight. "Kill him!" All 6 Saint Kings' expressions were icy cold. Even with their ability, they had to use 10 days' time to force Ling Han into desperate straits. If this brat was allowed to escape this calamity, there would definitely be no more chances for them in the future. "I will have to disappoint you," Ling Han exclaimed coldly. A drop of indestructible true fluid channeled through his body, and all his injuries were erased. In an instant he had returned to prime condition. The 6 Saint Kings almost went crazy. They had only just managed to force Ling Han into a corner after much difficulty, and now he was vigorous and lively again. He must have used a secret technique to forcibly heal his injuries. Either this is a temporary measure to suppress his injuries, or he would have to pay a massive price. It definitely cannot be used repeatedly. That's right. Since we can force him into desperate straits once, we can do it a second time. Put more effort into it. Cold daggers shot from the eyes of the 6 Saint Kings. For those who had reached a height they naturally did not lack toughness and patience. Immediately, they suppressed their throbbing hearts and began another siege. Ling Han was inflicting injuries on them in exchange for being injured himself, and after a fierce battle for another 10 days, he was again wounded to the extreme. But the 6 Saint Kings were also a tragic sight. Ling Han's extreme speed posed a massive problem for them. "Die!" the 6 Saint Kings called out coldly. They had once again forced Ling Han into a corner. This time, Ling Han could not possibly make a comeback. However, Ling Han again channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, and his injuries were completely healed once more with 10 days buffering time. It was enough to allow the indestructible true fluid to take full effect once more. At present, the only problem was the amount of indestructible true fluid. He only had a total of 10 drops, and once they were completely used up, there would be no more left. The 6 Saint Kings couldn't help but shiver in fear. He had done it again. How was this possible? Such a powerful healing technique should only be capable of one use. Otherwise, wouldn't you have become completely immortal? They did not dare take another gamble. Perhaps Ling Han would not be able to do this another time. But the problem here was that they had all suffered severe injuries as well. Perhaps they would be killed first without waiting for them to kill Ling Han. They desperately wanted to obtain the secrets that Ling Han possessed, but not one of them was willing to use their life to trade for these secrets. Helping another to complete their goal was something that they would definitely not do. Retreat. It was unknown who was the first Saint King to turn around and flee. All 6 Saint Kings actually fled in different directions, and they practically left all at the same time. Without hesitation, Ling Han focused on the Open Clouds King and set off in pursuit. Even if he possessed extreme speed, killing a Saint King would take a lot of work for him too. Thus, he definitely could only target one of them. There was naturally no need to consider the matter further. It was definitely the Open Clouds King that he was aiming for. Damn it! The Open Clouds King couldn't help but curse angrily. This Ling Han did not chase the others, yet aimed for him. Wasn't he clearly showing that he thought that he was an easily bullied target? He was a peak stage Saint King, faced with an opponent that had extreme speed and incredibly frightening destructive power. Just fleeing was definitely not the best strategy, as he could be caught up at any time and receive a fatal strike. The Open Clouds King turned back around, facing Ling Han directly. At the same time, his feet were sliding, continuing to retreat. With his strength, running forwards or running backwards, actually did not have much difference. His speed did not slow down in the slightest. Ling Han used lightning flash and instantly approached. Humph! The open clouds king channeled the power of time. The flow of time around him immediately became strangely slow. There was the past, present, and future. Even if a great saint entered into this area, they would instantly be torn into bits. Ling Han barged in, his skin immediately becoming bright red. The power of time was tearing at his body. If it were not because his physique was incredibly tough, he would definitely have been torn to pieces by now. He used the power of lightning. Extermination lightning surged, opposing the power of time. In theory, the power of time belonged to one of the strongest regulations, but aside from the regulations itself, the grasp over the regulations also factored in. Could it be that a celestial king who had grasped wood element regulations would be no match for a saint who had grasped the power of time? The open clouds king's power of time originated from his bloodline inheritance. It was limited by the purity of his bloodline as well as his own cultivation level. At present, his cultivation level had reached peak stage Saint King and was already the strongest cultivation level in the immortal realm. Thus, this power of time was primarily affected by his bloodline. Ling Han was different, though. His extermination lightning came from the heavenly tribulation fluid and was the strongest existence of a realm. Thus, it was not the slightest bit weaker than the open clouds king's power of time. Lighting was primarily meant for killing and punishment, and as Ling Han aggressively assaulted, the power of time was shattered to pieces, but his speed had also been hindered. His movements could now be distinguished. Darkness of the paramount night. Ling Han cast another celestial technique. A boundless darkness spread out, wrapping around the open clouds king. Just a simple illusionary art, and you think you can deceive me? The open clouds king sneered. He moved his hand, wanting to dispel the darkness, but he immediately realized that this darkness was incredibly dense. He had just dispelled a portion, and there immediately would be a new bunch of darkness filling the space once more. 9 meridians, celestial sword! He roared out internally, summoning a divine sword. A celestial light appeared, and under his strike, the darkness was forcibly sliced apart. This was the portion of celestial technique that he had obtained from the Heavenly River King, yet he had never dared to use it in front of others, unless he was sure that he could kill the witnesses. That was because he feared that the other forbidden lands would discover this massive secret. But since there were no others here, and he had encountered a great danger, he naturally would use it without any reservations. As the divine sword struck, celestial light appeared. Ling Han drew the broken wooden sword. In a direct clash of saint tools, the divine demon sword was only level 17, after all, and he had no wish to damage it. The broken wooden sword sliced out, with a lightning sword technique channeling from it. There were the tide of the ages and extermination lightning embedded in the technique. The open clouds king wanted nothing more than to refine Ling Han immediately. The latter had a shard of the power of time, which could advance his grasp of the regulations of time. But the problem now was that even the combined force of 6 Saint Kings previously was not enough to take Ling Han down. Could it be that he would have to use a Celestial King technique to be able to succeed? Celestial King techniques were indeed powerful, but firstly, he only obtained a portion, and secondly, it was limited by cultivation level. The might that he could release would also be limited. The two of them battled fiercely. Ling Han only had to face a single Saint King, so he naturally battled freely now. With a loud battle cry, his battle prowess was in full throttle, and attacks poured out like a furious wave. The open clouds king did not show weakness, and faced Ling Han head-on. The battle prowess of the two was about equal, so neither had an overwhelming advantage, which naturally made the battle become incredibly drawn out. A Saint King wanting to kill another Saint King was a difficult thing to accomplish. Previously, Even the 6 Saint Kings needed 10 days, time to be able to force Ling Han into a corner. And now, in a one-on-one battle, the battle would naturally be even more drawn out. Ling Han caused damage at the price of suffering injuries himself. His trump cards were more inclined towards defense. Indestructible true fluid could instantly heal his injuries, and reborn from the ashes could allow him to come back to life from death. He wanted to slowly wear the open clouds king to death. There was nothing else that could be done. Without overwhelming strength, that was his only option. Peak Stage Saint King was the strongest presence of the entire immortal realm. Which of them was not an incredibly talented genius? If they could be easily killed, that would be truly strange. Chapter 1639, Astonishing Toughness. Chapter 1639, Astonishing Toughness. As the Open Clouds King continued to battle, he continued to flee. Ling Han, meanwhile, endlessly sniped at him. This person possessed the power of time, and could be claimed to be the strongest threat to him in the entire immortal realm. He had to kill him this time round, or with how cowardly the Open Clouds King was, he would definitely relocate his lair in future and would no longer be found. Ling Han could not possibly stay forever in the ancient realm to hunt down this person. Die! Despicable brat, don't go too far! The Open Clouds King roared in fury. A mere medium saint even dared to pursue a peak stage Saint King. Even if Ling Han's battle prowess was indeed a match for the peak stage Saint Kings, he would still become a joke. Of course, what he was more concerned about now was his own life. As long as he managed to flee, he would definitely not allow Ling Han to find him again. Ling Han did not say anything. There was nothing much that he wanted to say to the Open Clouds King. It was destined that he would kill this Saint King, so what need was there for him to waste his breath on meaningless words? He did not worry about the Empress, the Rain Emperor, and the others. They were all already saints, and had enough strength to protect themselves. The Open Clouds King continued to flee, but faced with Ling Han's extreme speed, how could he manage to flee successfully? Initially, saints, whether they were small saints, great saints, or Saint Kings, were individuals no one would be able to stop from fleeing. But faced with Ling Han, who had cultivated extreme speed, this was like having met with the nemesis of saints. The Open Clouds King continued to use the power of time to block Ling Han. This was indeed effective, endlessly slowing down Ling Han's speed. However, once their distance grew slightly, the power of time's effects would not be able to be released to the fullest. Immediately, Ling Han would catch up with him again, and however hard he tried, he could not throw him off his tail. Flee, flee, flee like a stray dog. The Open Clouds King was filled with hatred. His target destination was the Open Clouds Forbidden Land. Though there was not a single Saint King there that could lend him a helping hand, there was a top-grade Saint Tool there, as well as a formation that he had spent a few 100 million years to set up. He was a man that feared death, so he naturally had to perfect his lair as much as possible. With him, the formation, and the Saint Tool, he was confident that even if there were 10 peak stage Saint Kings, he would be able to stop them, so what need would there be for him to fear Ling Han then? Pum, pum, pum. As he fled, it was inevitable that there would be a bloody battle the whole way. However, Saint Kings were really too strong. Even if they were severely wounded, it did not affect their battle prowess a single bit. The Open Clouds King was still strong, stubbornly rushing back to his lair. Fear of death was actually also a very strong motivation. Furthermore, among those who had reached the Saint King tier in the ancient realm was not an extraordinarily talented genius. The Open Clouds King had this kind of strong obsession. He was determined to get back to his lair. This caused him to release a strong fighting spirit. What if he was heavily injured? He'd just forcibly stabilize his wounds first with origin power. As they ran and battled all the while, close to 3 years' time had actually flown by. The Open Clouds King already lost a leg and an arm, and there was also a large hole in his chest that had gone through to the other side. He had also lost his left ear, and half his mouth was missing, but he still used his origin power to form a replacement leg and arm. His speed did not decrease, and his battle prowess was practically unchanged either. On the other hand, with the channeling of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, there was not the slightest injury on Ling Han's body. He was only filled with a blazing fighting spirit. When compared, the gap between the two of them was really too wide. However, Ling Han was still rueful. Saint Kings were really too hard to kill. He had clearly forced the other into such a tragic state, yet he had still not managed to succeed even after pursuing him for a whole 3 years. Yet now that they had reached this state, Ling Han was even more unwilling to give up. The Open Cloud's king was close to complete exhaustion. He had endured such heavy injuries, yet did not have the slightest bit of time to heal himself. Instead, he was still fighting a fierce battle. This naturally would only cause his injuries to become heavier and heavier. If he had not been a peak stage Saint King, then there would have been no need for Ling Han to attack him again, and merely his injuries would have worn him down to death. Ling Han's expression was cold. With the channeling of the immovable deity metal body mystical power and unleashing various celestial techniques, he once again stopped the Open Cloud's king from going further, and the two engaged in a large battle. The Open Cloud's king shouted repeatedly in rage. There was only a year's journey from this place back to his lair, but his injuries were already very, very severe. Even if Ling Han did not attack him again, he only had to continuously pressure him, and it was still possible that he would die during the one remaining year. He had to heal his injuries, or it would only be a slow death. But to heal his injuries, he had to first kill or throw Ling Han off his tail, and he could do neither of these two feats. If it had been another Saint King, they probably would have turned around and fought Ling Han to the death by now. Compared with dying in such a cowardly manner, why not just have a vigorous battle? But the Open Cloud's king was different. He had an obsession with continuing to live that no other person could imagine. He continued to flee, his battered body showing endless toughness. He wanted to live. Live. The two of them still maintained the same rhythm. The Open Cloud's king battled as he fled, and Ling Han battled as he pursued, and another half a year's time had unknowingly passed. Now that things had progressed to this stage, even Ling Han was very impressed with the Open Cloud's king. Such toughness and such powerful desire for survival were really too amazing. However, this would not shake Ling Han's resolve to kill him. The Open Cloud's king definitely had to die. With a battle cry, the broken wooden sword struck. A grand light blazed out, once more stopping the Open Cloud's king from going further. "Damn brat, don't think you can kill me." The Open Cloud's king's utterly damaged body moved and charged out to attack Ling Han. Pung! Under the battering, his injuries worsened a few more degrees, and he coughed up blood repeatedly. That was the blood essence of a Saint King. There were not even that many drops in his body, yet now they were beaten straight out of him. He did not wish to clash head-on with Ling Han, but there was nothing else that could be done. If he did not put his life on the line now, that would only end in his death. Return to his base. That was his obsession that suppressed all else. Ling Han set out in pursuit, his offensive incredibly berserk. Hunting down a single person for a whole 3.5 years' time was something that he had never done before. But who asked him to be only a medium saint at present? Being able to pursue and hunt down a peak stage Saint King while he himself was only a medium saint. What else did he have to be dissatisfied with? Fight. Flee. After another half a year's time, the Open Cloud's forbidden land was already close at hand, and the Open Cloud's king did not look like anything close to a human figure. All his blood had been burnt to nothing by now, and he did not look any different from a skeleton. He had just about finished burning all his life force, and on his face his 2 eyes were gone, only leaving behind 2 dark eye sockets that exuded a creepy light, as if he himself was a dead spirit. He had finally arrived. The Open Cloud's king tore a rip into space. The Forbidden Land was hidden in a galaxy and no one who was not a Saint King would be able to discover and open it. His figure entered, and Ling Han pursued without any hesitation, continuing his attacks. "Damn brat, hand over your life." The Open Clouds King released a loud laugh. As he beckoned with one hand, a flash of cold light shot from the Forbidden Land, and was gripped by his hand. It was a three-pronged halberd. The blade of the halberd was covered densely with patterns, and there was a paramount aura encircling it. At the same time, the whole Forbidden Land came to life. That was the formation having been activated. Endless spiritual chi gathered, turning into a massive ancient copper dragon. The Open Clouds King stood on the dragon's head, looking disdainfully at Ling Han. Now that he had a god tool in hand and the ancient formation had been activated, he felt full of confidence. All his self-confidence had returned, and he no longer feared having to battle Ling Han to the death. "Ancestor!" In the Forbidden Land, everyone exclaimed in shock. This skeleton was their ancestor. Hiss, the Open Clouds King, was a peak stage Saint King who had the bloodline of the dragon tribe. As long as it was not the last moment of their lives, those of their clan would be able to maintain a flourishing vitality. How could they possibly have exhausted their vitality in this manner? What kind of frighteningly strong foe had he encountered? Chapter 1640. The Open Clouds King is executed. Chapter 1640. The Open Clouds King is executed. The Open Clouds King waved the three-pronged halberd, wanting to start his offensive, but his expression suddenly changed greatly. H's hand shook, almost losing his grip on the god tool. He was already at the end of his rope, about to die. With how severe his injuries were, it was completely impossible for him to rush back here, but his will to live was too frightening. He burnt his vitality, burnt his life force, and forcibly dragged himself to this state. But his injuries would not disappear because of that. Contrarily, because he had burnt even his life force. How was he going to live on? His physical body was naturally indescribably worn out, and his spirit was also gradually aging, just like a worn candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any moment. He was about to die. The Open Clouds King was shocked. If he presently had not looked like a skeleton, his face would definitely have been pale. No, 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 no. The Open Clouds King was a man who had an extreme fear of death. The strength of his longing for life surpassed any ordinary person's, or he couldn't possibly have raced back here. Even in such desperate straits, he had absolutely no intention of giving up. The orbits that no longer had eyeballs swept over the people of the Forbidden Land, and a thought involuntarily flashed through his mind. A horrifying flame suddenly came to life in his eye holes. "Ancestor, go! Long live Ancestor! Kill that guy! Ancestor is invincible!" All the members of the Zhong clan shouted loudly, cheering on the Open Clouds King. In their eyes and hearts, the Ancestor was a symbol of invincibility, and this place was also the Open Clouds' Forbidden Land, where he would have the help of the formation and god tool, so he would naturally be even more invincible. Phew! The Open Clouds King suddenly took a deep breath, which took the form of a hurricane. This hurricane blew past, forming a powerful sucking force. All the members of the Zhong clan were still cheering when they suddenly felt an agonizing pain that came from the tearing of their flesh. They shockingly realized that the blood and flesh was presently being removed from their bodies. Why was it like this? The sucking force of the hurricane was too strong, and the members of the Zhong clan could not resist at all. Their blood and flesh were instantly removed from their skeletal frames and wrapped up by the winds, fluttering in the air, actually forming a copper dragon. Some clansmen had not advanced into the mortal level, and their souls were incapable of fleeing their physical bodies. Suddenly, their skeletons collapsed onto the ground, instantly dead. Those who had advanced into the mortal level could still hold on, the power of their spirits forcibly stabilizing their skeletons. As long as their life force was undamaged, they could still regrow their flesh and blood. However, they immediately lost hope. The hurricane came back, and this time it was targeting their spirits. Resistance was not allowed at all. Everyone's spirit was plucked, blown into the air by the hurricane. Even the few saints were no exception. In front of a peak saint king who held a top-grade saint tool and was controlling a supreme formation, all resistance was futile. Why? Ancestor, why? These clansmen, finally, cried out with their spirits. They were resentful. Why did their ancestor make a move on them as if he had gone mad? The Open Clouds king was unmoved. In the air, the blood and spirits of the members of the Zhong clan blended together, forming a colossal copper dragon. Every member of the Zhong clan had a certain amount of bloodline of the time dragon. With so much blood essence and spirits interwoven together, it formed this unique scene. He opened his mouth and sucked in a breath. Abruptly, this copper dragon flew towards him and sank into his body. Suddenly, his body seemed like a barren land that had obtained nourishment and immediately filled back out. Blood and flesh visibly appeared on his skeleton-like body, but he completely did not recover to normal condition and only seemed more human-like than before. He had had no other choice. His blood essence and life force were all fully exhausted, and only the clansman who had the same roots as he could save him. However, his cultivation level was too high, so even if he exterminated all the members of the whole clan, it only helped him recover a slight bit, and he could be considered to have been removed from the line of death. "Die!" he roared, brandishing the three-pronged halberd in an offensive towards Ling Han. The copper dragon beneath his feet released a dragon cry and blasted out the power of time. He hated Ling Han. All this was because of this evil brat in front of him. Otherwise, how could he possibly have been forced to the extent that he had to swallow the blood essence and souls of his clansmen? But he did not regret this at all. As long as he was still alive, he could reform the Zhong clan, and their glory could return. On the other hand, if he was dead, then the Zhong clan would really be finished. "You are worse than a beast." Ling Han's expression was filled with an icy coldness. This man actually was so demented to make a move on his own clansmen. He practically could not be considered human. Though he was on opposing sides of the Open Clouds king, he had never once thought of massacring the Open Clouds Forbidden Land as well. At most, he would only rob them of all their wealth and disband them. Yet, the Open Clouds king, for the sake of his own survival, actually did not hesitate from making a move on his own descendants, devouring their blood, flesh, and spirits to continue his life. This made him despise the former incredibly. "This is all your fault!" the Open Clouds king roared in fury, attacking endlessly. Now that he had the help of a top-grade saint tool and the formation, his battle prowess should be stronger than before. However, what was unfortunate was that he himself was too weak. Though he had recovered slightly through swallowing his clansmen, that only drew him away from the line of death. He was far from his prime condition. One was strong and the other was weak, and his battle prowess only stayed level with his previous condition. What did Ling Han have to fear? He used all his celestial techniques, his black locks dancing wildly, flames interwoven among his hair. That was because he was too furious. He could not help but want to slaughter this beast in front of him as painfully as possible. The Open Clouds king tried his best to fight back, but his body was already too weakened. How could it possibly hold up to such a fierce battle? They only exchanged a few thousand blows, and his condition was already beginning to decline, and he fell once more into a state of hopelessness. This time, there were no more clansmen left for him to swallow. Have a good trip on the path to hell. When you walk alongside your clansmen, let's see what face you have left to see them. Ling Han charged, his two swords striking madly. One sword sliced down on the Open Clouds king's head, while the other stabbed at the Open Clouds king's chest. What ability did the Open Clouds King have left to resist him? Pooh! His head suddenly flew into the skies, and a sword pierced through his chest, coming out through his back. No blood flowed, as he had long since turned his blood into battle prowess. How could there possibly be the slightest drop left? The Open Clouds King was unconvinced. His spirit escaped his body, wanting to make the final struggle, but Ling Han added another sword strike. The murderous aura of the divine demon's sword engulfed him, and the Open Clouds King's spirit was also sliced in two. That was an absolutely fatal strike. The two halves of his spirit still wanted to join back together, releasing a shout that sounded like a wolf's howl. Yet no matter how hard he tried, he could not accomplish it. "Why have you targeted me?" He released a roar of resentment. Previously, he had not been the only Saint King that had made a move on Ling Han. So why was Ling Han so determined to pursue and hunt him down? Furthermore, it had been a whole 4 years' time. If this had been any other Saint King, he would probably have given up by now, wouldn't he? "This is only karma," Ling Han uttered coldly. "I have gained the inheritance of the Heavenly River King, and have promised him to send you on your way." "What?" The Open Clouds King's spirit was astonished, suddenly stopping all struggle. So that was it. He smiled tragically. This was really eating one's own bitter fruit. All those years ago he had betrayed the Heavenly River King, and in the blink of an eye hundreds of millions of years had passed, and he had still met with the consequences of his own actions in the end. Ha 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 ha. His spirit released a bout of mad laughter, yet was swiftly crumbling. Soon it had turned to nothing, and had once again returned to the heaven and earth. A Saint King of this generation had died. With the death of the Open Clouds King, that three-pronged halberd immediately fell down from the skies, and the formation also stopped running, having lost its host. Ling Han withdrew his mystical powers. His eyes swept over the area, and he involuntarily sighed softly. The place below him was covered with corpses. There was clearly not the slightest smell of blood, yet it was exuding a strong feeling of misery. Chapter 1641, Following the Tracks. Chapter 1641, Following the Tracks. If the Open Clouds King had not betrayed the Heavenly River King, then the Open Clouds King should have entered into the celestial realm by now, and who knew, maybe he would have already become a severing mundane ancestor. But now, he still had not managed to truly obtain a celestial king technique, nor had he become a celestial being, and his bloodline had completely been wiped out. This could be considered his just desserts. Ling Han shook his head and conducted a thorough search. He found some godly metal, as well as a saintly medicine. He naturally took them without reservations. Then he sat down in a cross-legged position. After continuously battling for 4 years, his body was naturally unbearably worn out. Even if he was a saint, he would need a good rest after a continuous 4-year battle. Ling Han immediately discovered that when his body had recovered to his prime condition, the surge of origin power had not stopped. Instead, it continued to surge in his body. Multiple stars appeared in his dantian at an extremely swift rate. The accumulation of his origin power was increasing at a very fast pace. Ling Han couldn't help but be overjoyed. This had really exceeded his expectations. He had not thought that his battle prowess would actually obtain such a massive improvement after such a long, drawn-out battle. He naturally would not let this opportunity pass him by. He hurriedly comprehended Tao beneath the reincarnation tree, allowing his origin power and appreciation to soar simultaneously. After a whole half-month's time, he finally stopped, and the number of stars in his dantian had reached 50 million in total. 50 million. The upper limit of a medium saint was 100,000 stars. This meant that he was already half the way there, and when he had completely cultivated the middle stage of the medium saint tier, he only needed to form one more star, and he would have stepped into the late stage of the medium saint tier. Amazing! Should he find a few more Saint Kings to hunt down? Ling Han thought for a while, and involuntarily shook his head. Firstly, if it was not the Open Clouds King, it would be very hard for him to have such an urgent determination to kill him. Worst came to worst, he would just wait for a while, and when he had become a great saint, he would then go on to kill his target. Secondly, it was only a maniac like the Open Clouds King that would flee for his life as long as 4 years' time. If it had been any other Saint King that had more of a spine, he would have long since thrown his life on the line and fought him head-on. In the worst scenario, it would only mean death. This was no longer as simple a matter as a good opponent, but the level of mania. He stood up, preparing to return to Woodfigure Planet. Though most of his crew were in the Black Tower, the Empress and the Rain Emperor were still there. Returning naturally would also need around 4 years' time, and as Ling Han traveled, he did not forget about ingesting alchemical pills and cultivating. For one that had reached a height that he had as long as he was not in battle, he could cultivate at any time. However, the pills he ingested were naturally not of saint grade, so their effects were considerably limited, but a mosquito was still meat no matter how small it was. He traveled all alone in the universe for 4 years, and finally returned to Woodfigure Planet. 8 years had passed since the last time all the saints had battled. All the opposing Saint Kings had left Woodfigure Planet. What they were worried about now was that Ling Han would seek them out for revenge. Once Ling Han had advanced into the Great Saint tier, there would definitely be no one capable of matching him in the whole immortal realm. Most likely, these forbidden lands had all moved elsewhere and fled. Ling Han was in no rush to seek them out for revenge, either. His battle with the Open Clouds King allowed him to know that with his present strength, wanting to kill a Saint King was really too difficult. He had best work hard on cultivation and boost up his abilities. By then he would be able to easily suppress Saint Kings. He was slightly surprised. He had already returned to Woodfigure Planet, so why did no one come out to meet him? As his divine sense swept over, he discovered that there was actually not one saint-level individual here. Could it be that those opposing Saint Kings had all made a comeback, and the Empress, the Star Sand Saint, and the others were forced to flee? Ling Han called over a disciple, and after some questions he found out that an ancient site had appeared a few years ago, which had drawn the Empress and even the Star Sand Saint and the others to explore it, and they had yet to return. This ancient site had never appeared before this. No one had detailed information about it, and that disciple could not give him any concrete information. Ling Han let all the people in the Black Tower come out. Though the effect of cultivating underneath the reincarnation tree was the best, they could not constantly stay inside forever. He decided to take a trip and check out that ancient site. The Empress and the others had left 5 years ago, and had not returned even now. Perhaps they had encountered some kind of danger, so he naturally could not just sit by and wait. He, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and the notionless saint set out. The others had not advanced into the saint tier, so even if they went, they would be of no help. That ancient site was not too far from Woodfigure Planet, only a galaxy away. With the speed of a starship, it would need about 1 to 2 months' time of traveling, but under the feet of a saint, only half a day's time was needed. The 3 of them soon arrived in this galaxy. They could see that a mountain range had abruptly appeared in this initially empty galaxy. It was simply a float in the galaxy, but it was as if this mountain range was enveloped in an endless fog. It was incredibly vague, as if it did not exist in this world. Because this was a small world, they could not directly barge in, and had to enter through a specific entrance. There was no need to search thoroughly for it, because the 3 of them were not the only ones here. In the area ahead of them, they could see a great number of starships parked, as if they formed a galactic fortress. The 3 of them curved their auras and approached with a single step. Otherwise, if their saintly might spread here, there would be no one able to remain standing here. Ling Han did not like having others kneel in front of him. He had absolutely no need for such expressions of vanity. Here there was a doorway, which showed a path that led to the small world. It was clearly visible, unlike that mountain range which was enshrouded in cloud and fog. "Yo, this girl is quite pretty." Someone gave a wolf whistle at the sight of the heavenly phoenix, divine maiden. The opening of this ancient site had drawn innumerable forces. There were not only Saint Tyr ones, the majority was actually Eternal River Tyr forces. This was the more common level of forces in the immortal realm. Now there were so many, it was inevitable that good and bad people would be intermingled, and all kinds of characters would be here. This was a young man in the Sun-Moon Tyr. Relatively speaking, his natural talent could be considered quite extraordinary. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden turned around and threw him a glare. A frightening aura solidified. Pung! The person was abruptly sent flying. Blood spraying madly from his mouth. He spat out over a dozen mouthfuls of blood before finally stopping, his face completely pale and his body covered in a cold sweat. He did not even dare to say a word. Once he got back to his feet, he hurriedly turned and fled. Ling Han naturally would not take it to heart. He observed this ancient site, sensing the aura that was radiating from the passageway to obtain a direct observation beforehand. The saints actually were not able to come out of this kind of place even with 5 years' time? Was it too big? Or was there a precious treasure, yet it was hidden too well and more time was needed to find it? Or had they started a bloody battle over the treasure, and the victor had yet to be decided? "Let's go." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden tugged on Ling Han's sleeve. Ling Han nodded. Since he could not understand with mere observation, he would just have to go in. His wife and brother were both inside. If he didn't go in and look around for himself, his heart would not be able to rest easy. Senior brother Ling." A voice filled with pleasant surprise rang out. Long Xiangyue leaped over, her pretty face wearing a smile, enchantingly beautiful and exquisite. Ling Han paused slightly and smilingly asked, "Why are you here?" "I accompanied Auntie out to drive away her worries, and just happened to hear that an ancient site had opened here. So I came with Auntie to take a look," she replied quickly as she made a beckoning gesture behind her. True enough, Long Yushan was presently standing there. It looked like Long Yushan had not wanted to see Ling Han in the first place, but having her niece exposing her like this, she had no choice but to walk over. When she saw Ling Han, she couldn't help but be extremely stunned and exclaim in spite of herself, "You have actually advanced into the Saint Tier." These words were said very softly and very quickly, so it was likely that no one had heard her aside from herself. This was too inconceivable. Over a dozen years ago, Ling Han had only been in the pinnacle level of the Eternal River Tier, and now he was already a saint. Chapter 1642 Saint. Chapter 1642 Saint. Even if there was only a single step separating the Eternal River Tier and Genesis Tier, as someone who had personally experienced it, Long Yushan knew very well just how very difficult it was to breach this step. She herself could be considered extraordinarily talented. Not only was her natural talent astonishing, her ancestral bloodline was thick, but even so, she had still spent 2 million years' time to get from the consummate level of the Eternal River Tier to Genesis Tier. Over a dozen years. Gasp! She could no longer see through Ling Han. Not only could she not distinguish his cultivation level, she could not distinguish his age, either. She only knew that he was especially young. That vitality that burned as brightly as a furnace was practically enough to kill over half the elites in this world. This was really not fearing someone who didn't know what was what, but fearing to be compared. In front of Ling Han, who else would dare call himself a prodigy? Her eyes drifted, and turned to look at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint. Involuntarily, she was even more stunned. Another 2 saints. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was also incredibly young, while the notionless saint was the opposite. Though his vitality was also very exuberant, an aged feeling seeped out from his soul. He should be one that had been reborn through possessing the body of another. That was why the age of his body and spirit were completely different. My 3 friends. Long Yushan did not dare to put on any airs of seniority, and greeted Ling Han and his companions with clasped hands. Though she had witnessed Ling Han kill a saint before, and she knew that she could not treat him like any normal eternal river tear. Saints naturally had the pride of saints, just like the saint kings of the various forbidden lands. It was only after Ling Han had become a small saint that they began to finally address him as friend, acknowledging his identity and status. The notionless saint and the heavenly phoenix, divine maiden, returned the greeting. Seeing that Ling Han seemed to be very polite to her, they were naturally filled with goodwill towards her as well. Yet Long Xiangyue was watching dumbfounded. Why had Auntie called all 3 of them as friends? Wait, could it be? She did not dare believe it, and exclaimed in shock, Ling Han, you have broken through to the saint tier. Pooh! Those who had heard her exclamation in the area suddenly spluttered in laughter. This little girl was really ignorant. She had to have popped out of some unknown corner under a rock, actually thinking that that young man was a saint. What a joke! Just how many saints were there in the whole immortal realm? Furthermore, which one of them did not have gray hair? Without cultivating until looking like they were about to die, how could they possibly become a saint? This was the impression that the majority had of saints. They were either old men or old women. If you were not old, how could you have possibly become a saint? And Ling Han was clearly astonishingly young in appearance. His cultivation level was indistinguishable, but his vitality was exuberant. What part of him looked old in any way? Ling Han nodded. With his present strength, he no longer had to fear anyone in the ancient realm. That's great! Long Xiangyue exclaimed, clapping her hands, and felt pride fill her whole heart. The man that she had her eye on naturally had to be as extraordinary as this. Little girl, do not be deceived! Someone spoke up and advised her. There have been many con men recently, and they claim to be either elites themselves or the descendants of some great force. Actually, they're all unknown nobodies who are professionals at conning others out of their wealth and tricking young girls. Long Xiangyue was furious. They actually called Ling Han a con man? Pei, she actually wanted Ling Han to trick her, but the latter didn't want her at all. She was not an unreasonable person. The other had only advised her with good intentions, so she did not show her temper. She only pretended she had not heard him and ignored him completely. Ling Han, you're so great! She looked at Ling Han, stars almost visible in her shining eyes. Silly girl. The man that had advised her previously couldn't help but shake his head repeatedly. TSK, such a pretty little girl would actually be so dumb to be tricked by another, and would still think the latter was innocent. Oh, a saint? Why don't I ask for some guidance from you? A young man strode out with an expression of great pride on his face while raising a brow at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, Long Xiangyue and Long Yushan. His meaning was clear. Look, he was the person that rightfully deserved their admiration. This person is the 7th young master of the Yang clan, right? Precisely, he's Yang Ming. He is said to have reached the consummate level of the heavenly body tier 3,000 years ago. Initially, he should have a chance to enter into the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, but an unforeseen event happened in the Yang clan, and that was why he lost that chance. Otherwise, with Yang Ming's natural talent, he definitely would be qualified to become a disciple of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. Hiss, a disciple of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy? Then doesn't that mean that he would have a chance of becoming a saint? Of course. All the disciples of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy have potential to become saints. The passers-by all murmured softly. There were definitely some among them that recognized that young man as they called out his identity, which was extremely illustrious. There was a consensus in the several hundred galaxies in the surrounding area, and that was if anyone could enter into the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, he was definitely a prodigy among prodigies. In future, even if he could not become a saint, it was a sure bet that he could advance into the eternal river tier. Was that not awesome enough? Just how many saints were there in the whole immortal realm? On average, there was only one per galaxy. Below the saint tier, the next strongest would be eternal river tier. In future, Yang Ming would definitely be stronger than all the rest, and weaker than only saints, which was enough to make others extremely envious. Yang Ming. There were already a few women screaming in a besotted fashion. They waved their hands, wanting nothing more than to throw themselves into his arms. Yang Ming stood arrogantly, his nose raised so high that it was pointing skywards. Just look, this is what a young elite is like, having the bearing of a king tier. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. With his present strength and status, he really had no interest to drop down to the level of this kind of junior. He only asked Long Yushan, "Should we enter together?" "All right." Long Xianyue hurriedly agreed, as if she was afraid that Long Yushan would object. Long Yushan couldn't help but sigh internally. She naturally could tell her niece's intentions, but Ling Han did not look like he bore the same feelings in the slightest. This was destined to only be a one-sided crush. She had to find a chance to talk with Long Xianyue. She could not allow her to endlessly sink into a hopeless romance like this. "Let's go." They set off, wanting to enter into the ancient site. Yang Ming couldn't help but stomp in fury. He immediately caught up with them with a single step and grabbed at Ling Han's shoulder. "Mr. Saint, let us have a spar." "Whoa." Ling Han slightly released the aura of a saint. "Pa!" Yang Ming immediately collapsed on the ground, heavy drops of cold sweat dripping down his forehead. He felt as if he had just passed by the gateway to hell, his body trembling madly. "SSS Saint," he uttered in a shaking voice. This definitely was the aura of a saint tier, because he had already reached the peak stage of the heavenly body tier. Even an eternal river tier could not possibly scare him to such an extent with a mere wisp of his aura. "Pooh!" Many people in the area spluttered. They stared with shock and gaping mouths, as if they were dead fish. Saint? Really a saint? Impossible. But how could it be that Yang Ming would blurt this out without thinking? He was a young king tier in the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. If he blurted nonsense, how would he be able to face others in future? Gasp! How could there be such a young saint? Yang Ming couldn't help but kneel down and respectfully paid his greetings to Ling Han. He actually dared have ideas about a saint's woman. That he had not struck him dead with a single palm strike was really being merciful to the extreme. Greetings, Saint." He prostrated on the ground, using a most humble posture to express his remorse. Ling Han had not planned to drop down to his level in the first place, so he simply waved him off casually. Only then did Yang Ming dare to stand back up. He was filled with gratitude towards Ling Han. He had never thought that there would be such an easygoing and amicable saint. "Stand right there." Ling Han and his companions were about to set off again when they heard a sharp shout, and they saw that the young man that had previously fled in a sorry state had come back. There was a middle-aged man that had the cultivation level of the heavenly body tier beside him. He was releasing his aura without reservations, appearing to be very arrogant. "You dare to even make a move on a member of our Tong clan? Are you all tired of living?" the middle-aged man called out sharply. Chapter 1643. Chapter 1643. Shard of the Celestial Realm. Hearing this loud shout from this middle-aged man, the people in the surrounding area all had strange expressions, feeling extremely awkward. They all recognized these two people. The older one was Tong Yi, while the younger was called Tong Wenzong, and the Tong clan was an Eternal River tier-level force. The ancestor of the Tong clan was already in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier 100 million years ago, and belonged to the category of veteran elites. However, who was Ling Han? A saint. In front of a saint, what was a mere Eternal River tier, consummate, level worth. Absolutely bullsh, asterisk T. He actually dared shout and holler at a saint. What else could this be but an action to court death? Brother Tong E, how could you be so rude to this lord? Apologize quickly. Someone immediately said. This was Tong Yi's friend. Otherwise, who would dare interfere at this point at the risk of drawing the anger of a saint onto themselves? Lord. Tong Yi glanced at the speaker and couldn't help but humph internally. What do you mean by that? Are you still my friend? Being so young, if he managed to advance into the heavenly body tier, he would already be extremely lucky, and you call him a lord. Are you trying to trick me? What bullsh, asterisk T lord. Having injured a member of our Tong clan, even if he was a god, he would have to lower his head and apologize, he declared arrogantly. How dare you? Yang Ming leaped out, glaring angrily at Tong Yi. Brother Yang. Tong Yi was startled. He might not recognize others, but this was one of the well-known figures of the younger generation. His reputation was so established that his name was widely known even in the surrounding galaxies. This was a prodigy that was destined to become an eternal river tier elite, so he naturally had to be treated with respect. At present, he could still address him as Brother Yang, but in future he would have to address him as Lord Yang. Quickly apologize to the Lord. Yang Ming humphed coldly. Even he had to kneel down in apology. Just who did Tong Yi think he was? Tong Yi was startled. Why did even Yang Ming say that? Could it be that this young man came from some powerful background? Could it be that he was the son of a saint? Otherwise, even if he was the son of an eternal river tier, Yang Ming would not have to act so anxiously. Suddenly, his face turned pale in fear, and he was in a complete panic. Ling Han only smiled and nodded at both Long Yushan and Long Shunyue. Holding the hand of the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, he walked along the passageway. Tong Yi watched on from behind and didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. When Ling Han and his group had completely disappeared from sight, he finally asked, Brother Yang, just who is that person? That person. Yang Ming humphed coldly. That is a saint. Pooh! Tong Yi abruptly spluttered and coughed uncontrollably. His expression was filled with shock. Brother Yang, don't scare me. With how young he is, how could he possibly be a saint? Just consider carefully how you are going to make your apologies to that lord. Otherwise, not only you, but possibly even your whole Tong clan will be eliminated. Yang Ming said. This was not an exaggeration. If a saint was angered, the heaven and earth would pale. To say the least, even if Ling Han himself did not make any movement, it was guaranteed that there would be a great many people that would move on his behalf to gain his favor. In front of over a dozen or a few dozen Eternal River tier-level forces. Even if it was the Tong clan, what would they be worth? It was assured that they would be exterminated in a single night. With a flick of his sleeve, Yang Ming strode off. On the other side, the friend that had initially warned Tong Yi also left, washing his hands of the matter. Previously, he had already done his utmost, due by advising him. It was naturally impossible that he would die along with the Tong clan. Seventh great-grandfather, what should we do now? Tong Wenzong asked Tong Yi, scowling miserably. What should we do? What should we do? How do I know what we should do? Tong Yi suddenly exploded and pelted a series of slaps right at Tong Wenzong. You little bastard, if you want to die, just die on your own. Why did you have to drag others into it? Tong Wenzong also broke into tears. How could he possibly know that an impossibly young guy would actually be a saint? Even the ancestor of their clan would have to kneel and greet him upon meeting him. Yet Ling Han had completely forgotten this little intermission, traveling through the passage. When they reached a certain point, he felt his body become sluggish, as if he had passed through some kind of restriction barrier or something else. In short, this heaven and earth became completely different. What was most directly felt was the spiritual qi of this place. Its degree of density had increased more than 100 times. If one cultivated in this place, merely in terms of accumulating origin power, it would be indescribably fast. Even saints would be able to benefit. No wonder the saints had not returned. As long as their accumulation of origin power had not reached the maximum level, the benefits of cultivating here were extremely large. "Why is the spiritual qi here so dense?" the notionless saint exclaimed in shock. "I have ventured to innumerable planets, but there is not one place that can compare to this place. This is really too astonishing." Even a veteran saint like him would say that, which showed that the density of the spiritual qi here was indeed extraordinary. The heavenly phoenix divine maid nodded and said, "If this place does not close up, one can completely reach the great saint tier and then go out." Ling Han surveyed the surroundings. There were tall mountains everywhere in this place. They could not be seen clearly from outside, but one would immediately discover that these mountain peaks were so tall that there seemed to be no end in sight upon coming in. Even the vision of saints like them could not see where they ended. This was an extremely inconceivable matter. It should be known that if they spread out their divine sense, they could even envelop a whole planet. Yet in this place, they could not even see the full appearance of a mountain peak. These mountains are not just tall and massive. There is also a mysterious power here that is blocking out divine sense, the notionless saint said. That was indeed the case. In here, their divine sense could not be spread over too widely. It was as if they had returned to the shattering void tier, when the area their divine sense could spread over was only as large as a city. The 5 of them rose into the air, attempting to look over the whole area from a higher position. However, when they had soared to a certain height, they discovered that there was a powerful energy pressing down on them, stopping them from continuing to fly higher. Even if they were saints, so what? They could only rise to about 1,000 miles in height. Ling Han could fly higher and reach more than 3,000 miles, but compared to the height of this mountain range, that was completely negligible. Needless to say, Long Xianyue was even worse. About over 100 miles, she could no longer bear this pressure. The 5 of them descended. After Ling Han, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and the notionless saint exchanged looks. They could see a similar expression on each other's faces. This should not have been a part of the celestial realm that has fallen, right? Aside from the celestial realm, what other place in the ancient realm could have such dense spiritual qi? Aside from the celestial realm, what other force could suppress saints like them? During the great turmoil of the celestial realm, even celestial kings were battling furiously, so it seemed like there would be nothing strange if they struck off a mountain range of the celestial realm, which then fell into the ancient realm. Who knows, we may be able to gather a great many saintly medicine here. There may even be celestial medicine. Ling Han's eyes lit up. In the celestial realm, saintly material and saintly medicine should not be nothing too rare, and with how big this area was, they might be able to return with great rewards. What celestial realm? Long Yushan asked. Ling Han paused for a moment and then answered, "In this world of ours, there is a realm that is of a higher tier air. That is not the right way to put it. The celestial realm is actually also a part of the ancient realm. So how should I explain it?" He gathered his thoughts and then related the origins of the celestial realm to the 2 women of the Long tribe. Long Yushan and Long Xianyue were stunned speechless. This was a realm that they had never heard of before, and they were unable to accept it so quickly. However, would Ling Han deliberately tell such a lie? Furthermore, the spiritual qi in this place was too dense, and there was no explanation for it at all. Long Xianyue suddenly stumbled, and Long Yushan hurriedly supported her, asking, "What is it?" Could it be that, suddenly finding out about the existence of the celestial realm, she had been so shocked that even her legs had become weak? "The spiritual qi here is too strong. My body is feeling a little discomfort," Long Xianyue explained. Chapter 1644. The Living Creatures Inside the Mystery Realm. Chapter 1644. the living creatures inside the mystery realm. The spiritual chi here was too abundant, and even an eternal river Tiralit would feel discomfort. This was really exaggerated. The two women of the Long tribe were still in a state of shock from the information that they had just found out, and Ling Han and his two companions began to walk ahead. They had all become saints, so they could cultivate at any time. Their bodies absorbed the spiritual chi, continuously turning it into their own origin power. The stars inside their bodies were either expanding or forming from nothing. It was very quiet here. There was only a dense forest, and no animals existed. There were also no cries of insects, as if this was a world that contained only vegetation. They did not know where they should go, so they climbed towards the mountain peak to see exactly how tall this mountain peak was. Slightly less than half a day later, they were still unsuccessful. There was still a very, very far distance separating them from the summit. Now that they had arrived here, there was a very strong pressure that caused even them to feel strained, especially Long Xianyue, who was already covered with sweat. However, she was extremely headstrong. She gritted her teeth and did not request that they stop for a short rest. Long Yushan naturally could not bear to see this, and drew her into her own spatial god tool. Otherwise, even if she forced herself to bear with it, she would only be hindering everyone else's speed. Ling Han did not say anything, and was presently walking ahead. Suddenly his heart clenched, and he struck out with a palm strike, pressing down on Long Yushan. What is the meaning of this? Though Long Yushan had not had her guard up, the reaction speed of a saint was very fast. Her right hand instinctively formed a block in front of her, parrying Ling Han's attack, but she was still sent back 30 meters by this strike. And this was still because Ling Han had not used his full strength. Otherwise, with his usual battle prowess of a middle-stage Saint King, he would be able to kill Long Yushan with a single strike. Ling Han did not explain because there was no need to. Boom! A dark shadow scrambled out, pouncing at Ling Han and his group. Its target was where Long Yushan had previously been standing. Humph! The notionless saint immediately moved. He drew a treasured saber and slashed out at that dark shadow. It was forged from the saintly material that Ling Han had bestowed on him. Previously, Ling Han had obtained a considerable amount of saintly material and saint tools from the treasure trove of the Heavenly River King. He had given the majority of it to his brothers, disciples, and friends. At first, there were not that many, so there were not enough to be divided among all of them. 1. The precious saber glowed, multiple patterns appearing. The aura of great Tao was entwined around it, possessing astonishing might. The notionless saint was a veteran saint, after all. He had long since forged the saintly material into a weapon, and after he became a saint, he nurtured it day and night, instilling his own martial intent into the weapon, and a basic saint tool was formed. That dark shadow missed the target of its pounce and reacted extremely quickly. Suddenly, it swiped out with a claw, smacking over at the precious saber. Pum! A large boom rang out. The dark shadow was sent backwards, and the notionless saint also stumbled. He stepped back repeatedly for over 20 steps. What surprised Ling Han was that the heaven and earth here were surprisingly sturdy. Under the impact of the resulting shock wave, a part of the vegetation had been turned into fine powder, but the mountain itself was not damaged at all. Long Yushan naturally knew that she had wronged Ling Han, but her personality was a very proud one. So she did not apologize to Ling Han. She only turned to look at that dark shadow. It was a black panther. It was not very big, only about 3 meters long and about 1.5 meters in height. Its tail, though, was extraordinarily long as it reached a total 9 meters in length, and as its tail waved, they could see that there was actually a snake's head at the tip of its tail, presently flicking out a forked tongue. Which exactly was the real head here? Long Yushan humphed coldly and immediately charged towards that strange black panther. The bloodline of the dragon tribe surged. She was very aggressive and shot out a punch that took the form of a dragon's head, releasing the howl of a dragon. The true dragon belonged to the 9 heavens and to the majority of divine beasts in the world. It possessed a strong suppression ability. Unless the gap in cultivation level was too large, they would definitely be affected. Yet this Black Panther was completely unafraid of the dragon's might. Instead, it was as if it had been provoked. It bared its fangs, its 2 canines long and sharp, and there were actually densely covered patterns appearing on them, as if they were saint tools. It charged to attack Long Yushan, depending on the burst of power from its forelegs. Its speed instantly exceeded the limits, becoming indescribably fast. Pooh! It brandished its front paw, and there were also patterns glowing on it, forcefully tearing a hole through Long Yushan's attack. It aggressively barged in and bit ruthlessly at her wrist. With how sharp its fangs were, Long Yushan's wrist would probably be bitten off with this one bite. It would be like being severed directly by a saint tool, and Long Yushan was only a small saint. So how could she possibly manage to block this strike? Ling Han's figure suddenly moved, and with his use of lightning flash, his speed was actually even faster than the Black Panther. On the brink of crisis, he stood in front of Long Yushan and stretched out his own hand. With a hoo, the Black Panther had bitten Ling Han's wrist. Long Yushan couldn't help but gasp, and she didn't know what she was feeling at this moment. Previously, Ling Han had already dissipated an attack for her, but she did not appreciate his kindness, and instead even rebuked Ling Han. But what did he do? Repaying her misdeed with kindness. Not only did he not make a fuss over her mistake, he even blocked another strike for her, even if it was at his own cost. Though the broken limb of a saint could be regrown, what was important was this friendly regard. She was very strongly touched, but this feeling immediately turned into shock because the Black Panther actually could not manage to bite off Ling Han's wrist. Instead, its teeth were shaking, and there was blood surging from its gums. If it was not that the Black Panther's teeth were as sturdy as saintly material, probably the shock would even snap its 2 sharp fangs off. Are you still ing human? Long Yushan looked at Ling Han in shock. She knew that there were some that concentrated on cultivating their physique, but which of them could be compared to Ling Han? This was equivalent to stretching out his hand to be directly severed by a saint tool, yet almost causing the saint tool to shatter from the strike instead. The Black Panther was also confused. It couldn't even feel the existence of its fangs. They were limp and numb to the extent of almost falling out. It leaped back, its legs slightly bent, and its body slightly lowered. Its eyes focused fixedly on Ling Han, looking like it would attack at any moment. Strange, Ling Han said. This is definitely a demonic beast in the low extreme of the Genesis tier, yet did not actually gain intelligence and only has its primitive instincts of slaughter. This was inconceivable. Ordinarily, once they had cultivated the mountain river tier, demonic beasts could even take human form. What more something as simple as gaining intelligence? Yet, this Black Panther was already in the Genesis tier and belonged in the top tier of the immortal realm, but it only had its bloodthirsty instincts. This is indeed strange. The notionless saint nodded. However, its battle prowess is extremely strong, and it can be considered a king tier among small saints. He and Long Yushan had both exchanged blows with this Black Panther. Though it had only been a single exchange, it was enough for them to form their own judgment. But what was a king tier among small saints worth to Ling Han? He moved. Boom! As his hand stretched out, stars appeared, as if a new world had been formed. The Black Panther was instantly so scared that all its fur was standing on ends. Suddenly, it turned around and swiftly fled. Unfortunately, in front of Ling Han, even Saint Tyr's speed was not enough. Pah! The Black Panther was instantly subdued and flopped onto the ground, its limbs stretched wide. It was releasing low growls, but even so it was still showing its vicious nature as if it wanted to swallow Ling Han, its wild nature on full display. Chapter 1645. Chapter 1645. Interaction. Interesting, Ling Han said softly, and with a thought he had drawn the Black Panther into the Black Tower. Even if your power is Saint Tier, so what? Having entered into the Black Tower belonged to him now. Meanwhile, Long Yushan was stunned. Ling Han actually just took a Saint Tier demonic beast into his spatial god tool just like that? Weren't you afraid that this Black Panther would suddenly go on a vicious rampage and destroy that spatial god tool of yours? Oh, spatial god tools were not saint tools. Aside from being able to contain living creatures, they might not be all that much sturdier than normal spatial spirit tools. Why did that panther not gain intelligence? The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was also very curious. Ling Han hummed for a while and then said, "Our human race is called the most intelligent of all life. But if one has been living in a forest that is completely remote and removed from everything else since childhood, then he may possibly survive, but his intelligence would definitely be very low, and he would probably only be left with the instincts to live, right? But this Black Panther can cultivate, being able to cultivate to such heights. How could it possibly still be so primitive?" The heavenly phoenix divine maiden did not agree with such an explanation. Perhaps its bloodline is strong enough. As long as it could grow naturally, it would be Genesis Tier. Ling Han stated slowly. Gasp! The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others all inhaled sharply at the same time. That was too frightening, wasn't it? It would be in the Genesis Tier if it matured naturally. So how terrifying would this breed be? If there were slightly more of their number, then wouldn't they be capable of conquering the whole immortal realm? Ling Han shook his head and said, "It should be the unique environment here. The spiritual qi here is too dense, which gave rise to such conditions. Of course, the bloodline of that Black Panther must be of a very high grade as well. Perhaps it has an ancestor in the severing mundane tier, or even dividing soul tier. It is a demonic beast, after all. It does not have the learning ability and strong adapting ability of humans, but in terms of bloodline inheritance, it has more of an advantage." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others accepted that kind of explanation. Incomparable conditions for cultivation added with bloodline inheritance indeed could create such an elite that only knew slaughter and bloodshed. Is the whole celestial realm that frightening? Long Yushan asked. True dragons should be superior to millions and millions of living creatures, but now in a condition of equal cultivation levels. Her dragons might actually did not have the slightest effect on the Black Panther, which meant that the latter's cultivation level was not inferior to hers at all. This was a considerable blow to her superiority complex that had developed through the years. Ling Han and the others shook their heads. They hadn't gone to the celestial realm before, and had only heard that there were even more elites there. Genesis tiers, basically, could only be considered ants there. It was like one that had come from a small world. What was a shattering void tier worth? For cultivators, this was a choice. You could proclaim yourself ruler in a small world, but the price for that would be your lifespan. A shattering void tier could only live for around 1,000 years, but once they advanced to the mountain river tier, their lifespan would immediately spike to 100,000 years. Who knows how many demonic beasts there are here that are like this Black Panther, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden said. Then she turned to look at Ling Han, her expression filled with worry. If there were Saint King level beings, then even with the strength of the Empress and the Rain Emperor, they could only flee. They hadn't come back out even after so many years. One possibility was that they had found some great fortune here, and another was that they had encountered grave trouble. Ling Han nodded. He wanted to divine the whereabouts of the Empress, but there was a mysterious force here that was concealing the twists of fate, so he was completely unable to divine it at all. If this truly was a part of the celestial realm that had fallen, then what would Genesis tiers be worth in the celestial realm? It was absolutely normal that he was incapable of making a divination. They continued on their way up the mountain. but they still did not see other signs of life in the surrounding area. It was as if all the demonic beasts had been killed by that Black Panther from before. There was also day and night here, but it was not light at day and dark at night. Instead, there was half the time that the skies would be golden, and the skies would be silvery the other half of the time. It was unknown which was day and which one was night. There was no sun, no moon, and no stars. There was only the continuous range of mountains that seemed to have existed for eternity. We'll just consider the golden time as day and the silvery time as night. A day passed, and they all felt weary, so they stopped for a rest. This was very inconceivable. They were all saints, and they would actually feel tired after journeying for a day. It should be known that Ling Han had battled fiercely with the Open Cloud's king for 4 years straight, and hadn't he still come out of it, filled with energy and zest? It could only be said that this place was very amazing. Long Yushan released Long Xiangyue from the spatial god tool, while Ling Han drew out ingredients from the Black Tower, which he handed over to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the other women to cook. Not too long after, a fragrant aroma was released, greatly exciting their appetites. After a simple meal, Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden entered into the Black Tower, and Long Yushan and her niece did not suspect anything. They had all reached saint tier, so wouldn't it be very normal for them to have spatial god tools? She and Long Xiangyue also entered into her spatial god tool. She wanted to have a good talk with this niece of hers. Xiangyue, that man could not possibly like you. You had best sever this ill-fated affection as soon as possible to avoid being wounded too deeply, she said. Long Xiangyue pouted. After a while, she softly said, I know. He has a wife that is indescribably beautiful, so it is absolutely normal that he can't appreciate such a commonplace woman as myself. Hearing these words from her, Long Yushan was not satisfied, and she said, Even if that person does not like you, you do not have to feel inferior. With your qualifications, you would qualify as a match for any man in this world. Long Xiangyue shook her head. Auntie, you haven't seen that empress before. She is really a peerless beauty. If I was a man, I would definitely fall for her as well. There is really no comparison. Long Yushan was astonished. For exquisite beauties like themselves, they would admit that they were inferior to others in cultivation level. But in the area of beauty, they had absolute confidence in themselves, and thought that even if there were others that matched their beauty, it was impossible any who surpassed them existed. Long Xiangyue was actually completely bowled over by that so-called empress, which naturally made her feel very surprised. Just how beautiful could she be that Long Xiangyue would admit that she was inferior? Auntie, why don't we marry Ling Han together? Long Xiangyue suddenly suggested shockingly. Long Yushan, on our own we have no advantage, but it would be different if we are together. Both aunt and niece are two beautiful flowers, so who would not want to pluck these two exquisite blooms? The more Long Xiangyue said, the more daring she became. Only with that would we be able to barely compete with that empress. You're babbling nonsense. Long Yushan suddenly rebuked. Auntie, don't tell me that you have no feelings for him. Long Xiangyue threw everything to the winds. If you like him, you should pursue him. If you missed him, that would be a real pity. Don't tell me that you want to regret not having been more courageous today when you're old. Damn girl, don't say any more. Long Yushan rebuked. This was really utterly ridiculous. She actually wanted both aunt and niece to marry the same person. Just the mere thought of it made her furious. Long Xiangyue did not reply, but her expression was stubborn. This was the only possibility that she could think of that would make Ling Han interested in her. The journey is long, so let us just slowly wait. Even if you are a proud woman, we can slowly grind your pride away. Long Yushan did not know that this niece of hers was digging a trap for her presently. She was only vexed. This girl had really sunk deep into the mud. She was almost close to madness. She also firmed her resolve. She was determined to pull Long Xiangyue back to her senses. The two women exchanged a look, both of them wearing an expression of determination. Chapter 1646, Summit Giant. Chapter 1646, Summit Giant. Ling Han had a pleasant and wonderful night. He and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were lovey-dovey and hands-on with each other, and with his tireless effort he unlocked a few more positions with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, which intensified his interest. He really wanted to have a more in-depth study of the subject with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden in the Black Tower. Unfortunately, they had not come here on a romantic retreat. After a night of rest, all of them were energized. The spiritual qi here was really too dense. Even if only a single day had passed, their improvement was still obvious. They continued their journey. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Because there were no longer any attacks from demonic beasts like the Black Panther, they were not delayed. Their speed was still very fast, and they could finally see the summit by the 4th day. Being able to see the summit and arriving at the summit was naturally two different things, and when they saw the summit, all of them were stunned. That was because this mountain peak had actually been severed in half. From the part that had been severed, it could be deduced that there should still be a very great distance until the non-existing mountaintop. So when this mountain had been whole, just how tall would it have been? This was too astonishing. Ling Han and his group all shook their heads. They had never seen any mountain peak in the immortal realm that could reach such a height. This was practically melding a great star into the shape of a mountain peak. When this thought streaked through their minds, they all started and then exchanged a look. This was not impossible. From afar, they could already feel the pressure that emanated from the summit. That was a stronger aura than a saint's. There was merely a slight wisp, and it was enough to make them feel as if their saintly bodies were about to crumble. Long Xiangyue naturally couldn't bear it, and Long Yushan drew her inside her spatial god tool. After they traveled to a higher level, even the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, the Notionless Saint, and Long Yushan could not bear it any longer. They could only stop and watch as Ling Han continued to ascend the mountain. Ling Han traveled for several thousand miles, and his footsteps were also beginning to slow down. Now that he had come this far, even he dared not make any large movements. The pressure here was too terrifying. Thus, the slightest breeze could turn into a frighteningly destructive blade of wind. With one strike from this blade, even Ling Han's skin would be sliced open. Thankfully, his godly bones were even sturdier, and this was not enough to kill him. The indestructible heavens scroll circulated, and he healed his injuries as he continued his way up the mountain. He was an extremely curious person, and was determined to see what was exactly there on top of the mountain. He traveled for another 1,000 and more miles. Ling Han took every step with great difficulty. Even the weakest footstep could create a frightening blade of wind that would shatter his godly bones upon first contact. He could only make it this far. Ling Han stopped and focused his origin power completely on his eyes. The Eye of Truth activated, and he looked towards the summit. With his present cultivation level, the Eye of Truth was actually not very useful anymore. But no matter what, it was still a mystical power, so using it would still definitely be slightly better than not using it. Far in the distance, the scene that was initially vague slowly became clearer, and he could just barely make out something there. Ling Han narrowed his eyes. His sight penetrating such a pressured space would have great negative effects on him as well. He felt a great pain in his eyes, as if he was about to be blinded. He did not give up. Instead, he focused even more origin power into his eyes. Humph! He suddenly turned around, and tears of blood were actually streaming from his eyes as he felt a sharp pain in them. He hurriedly channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, and under its repeated healing, he finally felt that his eyes had recovered slightly. However, he had ultimately glimpsed the scene at the mountaintop, though it was just a single glimpse. Where the mountain peak was broken off, there was a black-colored rock. There was no tree nor a single blade of grass, and in the most central position of the broken peak, a person was seated on the ground. He was incredibly tall as 3,000 meters, his whole body green as if he was a tree himself. This person was extremely strange. The upper half of his body was indeed human in form, yet he had a pair of massive bull horns, but from the chest downwards he had the form of a deer with an additional 4 limbs. Whether it was the deer part or the human part, they were covered with multiple green-colored seals that exuded an endless air of life and vitality. Yet this person was dead. There was a hole in his forehead. It was not very big, possibly about as wide as a single finger's width, but it was this hole that immediately drew Ling Han's gaze. Though Ling Han had only caught one glimpse, he had spent half of it on looking at this injury. It seemed to have an endless attraction to him, and he couldn't help but stare at it. And it was this hole that had taken the life of this green-colored giant, having his spirit pierced. So what if his body was still unscathed? This giant with the body of a deer had a green-colored blood flowing from him, and it was this that nurtured all the plants that covered the whole mountain. Perhaps the forest of the whole mountain range had been nurtured from his blood. This person had to have cultivated with element regulations, and that was why his vitality seeped out and turned this mystery realm into an ocean of vegetation after he had died. Of course, it was also because of him that such pressure that even saints could not possibly approach the summit filled this area. Ling Han recalled the last detail that he had seen. It was not that there was completely no vegetation on the mountain top. There was actually an incredibly small plant by the side of the giant with a deer's body. It was less than a foot tall and had sprouted a verdant fruit. He did not know what fruit it was, but he was absolutely sure that being able to grow in such an environment, it definitely had to be celestial medicine. Unfortunately, he could not obtain it. Ling Han sighed. This was really too cruel. The celestial medicine was right in front of his eyes, yet he could only look at it helplessly and sigh. However, he was a man that could go with the flow. Immediately, he turned around and headed down the mountain. The most important goal for him now was to find the Empress and the others. When he found them, then he would consider how he was to obtain that celestial medicine. Ling Han turned around and left, but he had not traveled very far when he got a very strange feeling. He stopped, and this kind of feeling abruptly vanished. He set out again, but it was only a while, and the strange feeling had returned. He swiftly walked down the mountain, and the farther he went, the weaker and weaker the blades of wind became, which allowed him to use movement techniques and not be sliced into pieces by those wind blades. He used lightning flash, and his speed reached the true limits of the immortal realm. His speed could match the speed of a heavenly tribulation, and as expected, that strange feeling disappeared once more. He stopped and thought, could it be that there is something following me? Otherwise, there was no other way to explain that strange feeling. He once again set out, but not too much time had passed, and that feeling actually came back again. Ling Han suddenly turned around, but there was absolutely nothing behind him. There was only a wide expanse of trees, and that strange feeling had again vanished at the same time. This was too strange. Ling Han turned back around and walked at a very slow speed. After he had walked for at least 30 minutes, he suddenly made a rapid turn, used lightning flash, and streaked in the direction behind him. In that instant, Ling Han's expression involuntarily became incredibly strange because he finally discovered the source of that strange feeling that he had been getting. He had indeed been followed, but the culprit was not a human, nor was it a demonic beast. Instead, it was a bone. It was more than a foot long and completely snow-white. It stood upright as if it had 2 legs, and the instant it saw Ling Han swiftly return, it actually looked like it was about to turn and break into a run. Chapter 1647, Bone. Chapter 1647, Bone. A bone as white as jade was actually following him. Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. this was really too ridiculous. Furthermore, this bone was really too human. It actually knew to hide from him, and it really had hidden successfully. If Ling Han had not turned around all of a sudden like this, he definitely would not have been able to seize it. Had it come alive? Ling Han descended and was only about 3 meters away from that bone, but he did not make a move. Even if it was only a bone, he could still feel a terrifying aura from it, so he did not dare to make any rash movements. The bone also seemed to be looking at him. Then it shook its body and actually slowly buried itself in the ground, as if it was going to pretend that Ling Han had not discovered it and was planning to make its getaway. "Hey, I saw you," Ling Han declared with a smile. Otherwise, he really didn't know what kind of attitude he should adopt towards such a strange bone. The bone suddenly popped back up, as if it had gotten a scare. It could be seen that its body had actually bent, clearly expressing its shock. Ling Han began to break out in a cold sweat again. Could anyone tell him what was going on exactly with this bone? "Can you speak?" he asked, and when he asked this question, even he himself felt it was a strange question to ask. "Can you speak?" Unexpectedly, this bone really replied. However, it was not speaking verbally, but rather communicating through divine sense. It seemed like an infant that was just learning to speak, its voice incredibly soft and childish. "My name is Ling Han. Do you have a name?" Ling Han asked. "My name is Ling Han." The bone repeated Ling Han's words again, but its speed was considerably slower. Ling Han could feel a headache coming on. This bone seemed to have somehow gained consciousness and become intelligent, yet it was in the beginning stage of just starting to understand. Thus, it didn't even know how to speak and knew only to repeat his words. He sighed and sat cross-legged on the ground. The bone did not move, but it was visible that its upper half slightly bent, as if it was slanting its head to one side. Then it too wanted to sit down, but it did not have legs to cross, so it could only bury half the bone into the ground so that it too looked like it was sitting down. This was like a puppy that was imitating those around it. Ling Han talked with it and did not touch on any important topics. He only wanted it to have more contact with words, hoping that it could truly have its own voice. "Yaya, yaya." Half a day later, the bone finally was no longer continuing to copy his words, and said a phrase that belonged to it alone. Yet it was completely meaningless, but it seemed very happy. "Yaya, yaya," it repeated endlessly. "Can you speak now?" Ling Han asked. "Can you speak now?" "Yaya," the bone replied happily. Fine, it was a waste of his breath to even ask. However, this bone was not so afraid of him now, so Ling Han could approach closer and examine it more clearly. This bone was considerably extraordinary. It was nothing so simple as having gained intelligence. The bone was not only snow white, it was also jade-like, not having the slightest feeling of malice, as if it was a delicate piece of art, yet the tastes of that grandmaster that had made it were too weird, and that was why he had made it into the shape of a bone. On the surface of the bone, there were multiple patterns that were extremely complicated. Ling Han only looked at them for a while, and he was already dizzy. They were even harder to comprehend than the celestial formation he had obtained. What relation did this bone have with that celestial corpse on the summit? It was only when Ling Han was descending the mountain that he gained that strange feeling. This bone should have appeared when he had been spying on that celestial corpse. It probably sensed Ling Han's gaze and had thus followed him all the way here. Others could not have reached that kind of height, so they naturally could not have possibly alerted this bone. The bone was a part of that celestial corpse and had somehow gained consciousness. Was he a magnet for trouble? Ling Han reflected on himself. The ancient sites that others went to were all normal, but when it was him, there was practically none that was actually normal. "Do you eat anything?" Ling Han drew out some food to eat and took out a portion, which he placed in front of the bone. The bone looked at it with a cocked head and very much wanted to eat like how Ling Han was eating, but it did not have any mouth and so could not eat in the same way at all. It was so anxious that it began to call out "Yaya" again, yet was completely helpless. It seemed to have been angered, and suddenly shot out a green-colored light which landed on the food. Pah! This portion of food immediately turned into nothing. Yaya! The bone once again called out in happiness. Its mood improved all of a sudden. It really had quite a temper. Ling Han was surprised. The power of this green light was very strong. No, 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 it should not be normally strong, but rather extremely strong. At least, he estimated that he would need to exert his full effort to be a match for it. This bone was like a child emperor that had supreme authority in his grasp. With a slight move, it could turn the whole world over, and there was practically no one that could restrict it. It was only a bone, but how did it possess such power? And how had it gained consciousness? Ling Han stood up and began walking down the mountain. The bone copied his movements. Its intelligence was becoming higher and higher, and it actually absorbed the spiritual chi in the heaven and earth, and grew its own physical body. Torso, limbs, and head quickly grew out. This was a real body of blood and flesh, though there was no soul. However, its body was enshrouded by an air of primal chaos, so how could any normal person be able to distinguish it clearly? What struck Ling Han speechless was that this guy was actually using him as a blueprint, and the body that it formed was a remarkably similar copy of him. As long as it was mere appearance, it would be too easy, but his aura could not be imitated. Yet the bone did not mind at all. It did not want to pass itself off as Ling Han. It was only the mentality of a child wanting to be like you. What shocked Ling Han was that he did not discover any problem with the bone's body upon first look, and had to stare at it and examine closely to finally discover that there was an additional bone in this body, which was also its true form. It could be claimed that this guy's disguise could be considered perfect. Under such a disguise, the aura that it released was considerably weaker, seeming to be the early stage of Saint King. This was because it had an additional layer of blood and flesh wrapped around it, which naturally weakened some of its aura. After all, this was blood and flesh that it had grown on its own. This was good. It would avoid shocking others. Yaya, the bone spoke up. It now had its own body of flesh and blood, and could finally speak in the true meaning of the word, which made it very overjoyed. Yet the only phrase it could use to express its own will was still Yaya, and aside from that, it only knew how to imitate words. Ling Han smiled and took out some clothes from the black tower, which he tossed over to it. The two people descended the mountain, and they saw the heavenly phoenix, divine maiden, and the others not too long after. Upon seeing another that looked completely identical next to Ling Han, they were all shocked. Hadn't you just gone up to explore the mountain? Why had you brought someone back with you, and one that looked completely like you at that? This is Xiaogu. Ling Han gave the bone a name. This is Xiaogu. The bone repeated his words, looking dim-witted. Long Xiangyue suddenly spluttered in laughter and asked, Senior Brother Ling, why does he copy what you say? Senior Brother Ling, why does... The bone exuberantly repeated her words. Was this guy here to be funny? The heavenly phoenix, divine maiden, and the others all had strange expressions. Who exactly was this person?